ECS test 1, 2, 3.
Good afternoon, everyone. As we have quorum present for this afternoon's meeting, I'd like to call this meeting of the Emergency and Community Services Committee to order. With me in chambers today, we have Councillor Jackson, Councillor Huang, and Councillor Clark. And none of my colleagues are online, but there are a couple of others who might be joining as we go. Reminder that all electronic devices are to be switched to a non-audible function during committee meetings. And once we've all done that, may I please have a mover and seconder to approve the agenda as presented? Councillor Huang, seconded by Councillor Clark. All those in favor, show of hands. That carries unanimously. Thank you. On to declarations of interest. Any to declare at this time? Welcome, Councillor Alex Wilson, Councillor Taddison. Seeing as there's no declarations of interest, we'll move on to approval of the minutes of our previous meeting of July 31st this year. Can I please have a mover and seconder for the minutes? Moved by Councillor Clark, seconded by Councillor Huang. Any discussion on the minutes from our previous meeting? Seeing none, I need your vote, please. Show of hands. And that carries unanimously. Thank you. And just a note for public, we did just complete a General Issues Committee budget meeting, the first one of the 2026 budget process. So that's partly why my colleagues needed a few more minutes getting into the room for our 1:30 meeting. Next up on the agenda, we have delegations. First up, 6.1 is Helena Vermillion from SWAP Hamilton, respecting City of Vancouver's 2025 TGD 2S Safety and Inclusion Action Plan. This is an in-person delegation, but before our delegate comes down to share with us, I do need a mover and seconder to accommodate an additional 5 minutes to complete the delegation. Thank you, Councillor Jackson, seconded by Councillor Alex Wilson, and that will require an electronic vote. The vote is up and live. If committee members could please do so. We have Councillor Crutch in favor, Councillor Huang in favor, and Councillor Jackson in favor. And everybody else has voted online. Thank you, the vote carries. Welcome, Helena, you have 10 minutes.
Okay, I'm ready. May I start?
Start the clerk when you start, so whenever
Okay,
you're
through
ready.
the chair, good morning. Chair members and members of the committee. My name is Helena Vermillion. I'm a transgender woman. My pronouns are exclusively she, her, and I thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. I've already requested the 5 minutes. Thank you for the additional 5 minutes. Within the last 2 years, the YWCA Hamilton completed a gender-based safety audit. I supported that work as a delegate and as a participant. While it did recommend to increase access to training and education around topics including gender identity and diversity and cultural competency, this one recommendation caught my attention. Quote, expand gender-specific programming and recreation impact, creates tailored, safe spaces for women and gender diverse individuals, encouraging participation in recreation without fear of discrimination, unquote. Considering the proliferation of legislation in Canada targeting and discriminating against my community, such as Alberta's Bill 29, aka also known as the Fairness and Safety in Sport Act, which segregates trans women out of playing sports with cisgender women, there are serious concerns that if this verbiage in the YWCA's report is adopted in the least charitable way, it may be seen as a dog whistle to recommend the tailoring, meaning, read as, the segregation of spaces by gender. More specifically, it could be uncharitably interpreted to mean providing trans people services as a third gender as opposed to allowing them to integrate and to include them in the space of their respective gender identity. And while we're on the topic, I must remind you that trans is an adjective. It describes the kind of people we are. We are people before we are women, men, any or no gender. I implore corporations and nonprofits and municipalities to stop saying gender diverse individuals. We are people. People. Please refer to us as people. It will not ruin your corporate image. Thank you. This and the lack of explicit and culturally competent recommendations for this priority population in the report matters because safety is not experienced equally. Trans, non-binary, intersex, and Two-Spirit residents face much higher risks of harassment, discrimination, and violence. Two-Spirit people specifically also face compounded exclusion due to colonization and underfunded services. These were not spoken to adequately in the YWCA Gender-Based Safety Audit report. Now to segue. The City of Vancouver recognized this reality and responded with a trans, gender variant, and Two-Spirit inclusion strategy in 2016 and again this year in 2025, this summer. They developed it after extensive consultation and they built it around 5 clear pillars. 1, public spaces and facilities. For example, expanding universal washrooms and updating signage to reflect function. So this washroom has urinals and this washroom has stalls, or you know what I'm saying, that are specific to trans, non-binary communities, but also more broadly applicable to all people. Programs and services, ensuring existing services are inclusive and creating some that are specific to trans non-binary communities. Human resources, training staff, updating hiring practices, and dedicating resources to coordinate inclusion across departments. 4, communications and data, collecting inclusive gender data and making sure the city's public communications reflect trans people. 5, community consultations and partnerships, engaging trans, non-binary, and intersex residents intentionally, not as an afterthought, and partnering with the organizations that already serve us. Vancouver also launched quick starts, actions they could implement right away, such as updating washroom signage, training senior staff on inclusion, updating grant priorities to reflect trans inclusion, building checklists for inclusive city events. These are practical, affordable, and effective. They set the tone that inclusion is not optional, it's a basic requirement for safety and dignity. Can I just ask that the evidence sheet has been handed out? Okay, thank you. Evidence of discrimination and harm. You've been provided reference pages. There's also the list of references in the attachments that the clerk has provided. 41% of trans and gender variant people have attempted suicide compared to 1.6 of the general population. I want to clarify, that's not because trans people are naturally or inherently crazy, it's because of how the rest of the population treats us, mistreats us. Rates rise to 55% for those who lost a job due to bias and 64% for those who experienced sexual assault. 2/3 of trans people in Ontario avoid public spaces out of fear of harassment or violence. 19% of trans people have experienced homelessness, including myself. I was homeless for 4 months in 2014. This is how I entered the sex industry and earned income selling sexual services for survival. I suspect there is a correlation between the amount of trans people who aren't allowed to go home to their families and the rate of trans homelessness. Sex workers, especially trans women and non-binary people, are far more likely to face violence and be denied housing and services. Of those seeking shelter, 55% were harassed, 29% were turned away, and 22% were sexually assaulted inside of the shelter. I was sexually assaulted in Cambridge at the Bridges shelter. These are not just statistics. They constitute real, significant pain and suffering human beings are subjected to. Of those seeking shelter, I already said that, I'm sorry, redundancy. 29% of transgender people report being turned away when trying to access those shelters. 21% of youth in Toronto's shelter system identify as LGBTQ2S, double the adult rate that trans youth in particular face. Two-Spirit Indigenous people face compounded, I already said that, I'm sorry. I did this in a flurry last night. Transgender and non-binary people experience disproportionately high rates of violence and exclusion from housing and services. I just said that twice, I'm sorry. Hate crimes against the 2S LGBTQI community have increased by 388% between 2016 and 2023. That's an eGale statistic. The unemployment rate for transgender people is double that of the general population, and 1 in 5 have been refused houses or apartments because of their gender, or like me, facing eviction by City Housing Hamilton because they hate us. 54% of transgender and non-binary people in Canada worry about being harassed by police, with this number being much higher for BIPOC individuals. Hamilton now has the opportunity to show the same kind of leadership as the City of Vancouver. Hamilton has already, or at least on paper, committed to equity, diversity, and inclusion. And I know about the trans protocol, only the result of legislation. Thank you, Jody Cock and Cole Gately, for implementing it, but it shouldn't have to require legislation for you to do the right thing. A trans, non-binary, two-spirit, and intersex safety audit would move us from principle to practice. Here's what I'm asking this committee to do. 1, direct staff to begin work on a trans, non-binary, two-spirit, and intersex safety audit for the City of Hamilton modeled after Vancouver's. 2, ensure this work is co-designed with community members and organizations who represent us. Pay trans people to do the consultation work. Don't just funnel money through corporations or nonprofits like huge multi-million places like YWCA. Pay trans people to do this work. We know how to speak to people in our own community. So effectively, not just the popular or economically successful people should be doing this kind of consultation work. It must be class conscious, and nothing should be done about us without us. 3, commit to implementing quick, visible changes such as universal washroom signage while the longer-term plans are being developed and implemented. 4, report back regularly on progress so that accountability is built into the process. This is not just about inclusion. It is about public health and safety. I am a human being, and my safety and my community's safety matters also. Research shows that when trans and non-binary people are supported and accepted, health outcomes improve for everyone. Inclusion reduces homelessness, improves mental health, and lowers rates of violence in our community. Hamilton can and should be a champion in this area. By conducting this audit and committing to real action, you would be sending a clear message that trans, non-binary, intersex, and two-spirit people are valued residents of this city, constituents of this city, and that our safety matters as much as anyone else's. How much time do I have left? Perfect. So I'm just going to go through the documents. So this is the actual 2025 from this summer document. You have copies of this. I implore you all, I encourage you all, I beg you all to read it on your own time. The other one is 95 pages. I'm sorry, but please, our lives are important enough for you to take time to read 99 pages, 95 plus 4. This is the other report, and the references that I have provided you, actually, I'm going to take it back for a second. These references come from City of Toronto, City of Vancouver, a report of a National Transgender Discrimination Survey, Transpulse Canada Project, Transpulse Project, Vancouver Park Board, Vancouver Board of Education, and everyone else listed on there. You have references, you have scientific data. There's no reason for you to deny what we're claiming. This is the 95-page report. And I'd also like to say, standing beside me is Lisa Stroud, a 72-year-old trans woman who had her teeth knocked out. 4 months after I was concussed and got a brain injury at Take Back the Night 2 years ago, the same night that I delegated to support the gender-based safety audit was the day I was concussed, and it was validated under the criminal code to be a hate-motivated incident. Living in City Housing Hamilton, I've been the victim of uttering threats. I've been the victim of assault with a weapon. I'm being terrorized in public housing because I'm a transgender woman with sex work experience. People have taken my pornography that I performed in and showed it to other people on YouTube, not YouTube, wouldn't be on YouTube, on their phone. And I've had people make retching gag sounds as I walk by with my service dog for my PTSD, my autism, and my ADHD. Trans people are not respected. And we deserve to grow old in safety. We deserve to live in cities. There are no trans people except Alex Wilson that are on council. We need more trans people represented in positions of power, and the system is not accessible. We need equity. We demand equity. Thank you. Are there any questions?
Thank you for your delegation and for speaking truth to violence experienced in our community, structurally, systemically, individually, and on our streets and neighborhoods. I think everybody on this committee stands with you to say that that is absolutely unacceptable. And as council members, I think we're standing here honorably and committed to continue to challenge that hate-based activity that occurs in our community, and really appreciate your delegation.
Do you have questions other than lip service?
Do you have any questions on the delegation? Thank you, Councillor Alex Wilson.
Thank you, Yelena. I appreciate the resource sheet, the additional information. I just want to go back to, I think it was the very first point you made specific to the report, and there was some language in the report that you were just asking us to be noting the phrasing of it or knowing that. Could you just redirect my
Yeah,
attention
I'll
to
repeat
where
it.
that was?
Sure. So it's in the actual report. It's in, I think it was page 6 is where I first read it. Page 6 of the Gender-Based Safety Audit Report. I think it was authored by Jessica Chase. Am I wrong? I don't know. Yeah? Okay. Sorry, I just don't want to misattribute. The quote I referred to, quote, expand gender-specific programming and recreation impact, creates tailored safe spaces for women and gender diverse individuals, encouraging participation in recreation without fear of discrimination, unquote. We understand that it's intended well. We understand that you mean well. I'm not trying to jump down anyone's throat. We also understand that a policy existing and the implementation of that policy are two divergent things. You have to hold everyone to account. The policies can be implemented in an uncharitable and prejudiced way, and we fear that this could be part of that. If someone interpreted that, they could say, oh, well, sure, let's make safe spaces for women, men, and trans people, but separate. That's called segregation, and we don't want that. We want to be integrated into spaces, into society, into our world, because we are being segregated.
No, thank you for redirecting my I just, in the information dense delegation, missed the very first thing you said.
No problem.
And so just wanted to be redirected back. Thank you.
Thank you for your question. I rarely receive them after I delegate.
Speakers list remains open. Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you
Thank you very much.
for your delegation. Okay, at this point, I need a mover and seconder to receive the delegation. Moved by Councillor Huang, seconded by Councillor Clark. All those in favor, it's a show of hand vote, and that passes unanimously. Thank you. On to item 8, items for consideration. HSC 25007A, Community Safety and Wellbeing, Gender-Based Safety Audit Action Plan Citywide. I'd like to call on Jessica Chase, Director of Children and Community Services in the Healthy and Safe Communities Division, to introduce today's presentation. Director Chase.
Thank you very much. Through the chair, I'm pleased today to open the discussion on phase 2 of the gender-based safety audit. You will recall that in March of this year, Council approved the audit, which we did. We contracted through the YWCA Hamilton, and I do want to recognize that they are in Council chambers today and thank them for the work that they've done. This initiative reflects the city's ongoing commitment to making Hamilton a safer and more inclusive community for all. Through extensive collaboration across departments, as well as extensive community engagement, we are working towards embedding a gender-based safety lens into our policies, programs, and public spaces here in Hamilton. This work supports the work happening with our Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan and aligns with Council priorities. Since March, we've been planting the seeds of this work, and over the summer months, we begin to see them blossom, exemplifying how strong roots are forming across departments, community partners, and residents. I use the analogy of planting seeds quite purposely here. As you may recall, at the March committee meeting, we engaged in a planting ceremony, which was to symbolize this important work that we were undertaking as a community. 3 different plants were potted and have continued to be cared for by city staff, by community partners at the YWCA, as well as from youth at a local school. It's been encouraging over the last several months to work across departments and divisions within the city and see the number of initiatives that are already planned or underway, which support this work and provide a great foundation on which we can build. I do, however, want to recognize that we know that there's further work to do to embed a gender-based lens into the work going forward. It's my pleasure to introduce Rochelle Ihiguaba, who is the Manager of Community Strategies. She and her team have been leading the development of the Phase 2 action plan, and they're going to walk us through the key findings, the actions, and the next steps. I want to thank Rochelle and her team for the leadership that they have been providing in this work, as well as thank the presenters that Rochelle will be introducing momentarily who have been champions for this work. These are champions from across the corporation, and as we know, the success of this work is contingent upon support across the corporation, so I also want to recognize and thank the champions who are co-presenting us today. Thank you.
Sorry, I'm just trying to get WebEx to show. That's okay.
I can get us started as we get the presentation on WebEx. Thank you, Director Chase. Appreciate the introduction. I'm excited to share the update on Phase 2 of the Gender-Based Safety Audit Action Plan, and I'm thrilled to be joined by our colleagues, our city champions, just a few of them, to share more about the great work that's been underway. So today you'll see Laura Kerr, Manager of Program Development with Recreation Services. Ali Saborin, Customer Experience and Innovation Manager with Transit Services, Mike Fields from Transportation, and Peter Fortune, Manager, Placemaking, Arts and Projects in Tourism and Culture. So really pleased to have everyone. Whew, mouthful.
I can't get the presentation up, Jeff.
And so we've intentionally brought forth an action plan to demonstrate to you that there's great work happening across the corporation. We'll speak more about the number of initiatives that are underway, but really taking council's direction to ensure that the recommendations we receive from the YWCA are resonating within our corporation. There's 13 different city divisions that we've been working with to identify this action plan, and really pleased that we continue to work with the YWCA Hamilton, BGC Hamilton, Hamilton Police Services, and Hamilton Public Library have also identified some key actions at this point and will further that community engagement in the next phase. Okay. And so for the agenda today, we will provide just some more context in terms of the Gender-Based Safety Audit Initiative, present the consideration report recommendations for council to consider, work through some of the promising practices that we've identified as part of the audit across the corporation, and then look at some of the next steps to advance this work. I'll now turn it over to Laura Kerr.
Thank you, Rochelle. So as mentioned, the action planning phase of our work really began in March 2025 and was guided by the recommendations that were brought forward. Our initial review across the corporation determined there's a lot of great work underway already. And in fact, 191 actions has been identified related to this work and contributing to the actions. The approach to the action planning was guided by the themes that were set out within the audit, and those themes will continue to be used through further consultation that we use through implementation of those actions. Alignment with strategies and plans across the corporations will also be embedded into key focus of this work. So before you today are 3 recommendations that will support the action planning, as well as effective implementation of this plan. These include that the Gender-Based Safety Audit Action Plan be approved, that the leads of the Gender-Based Safety Audit be directed to prioritize the implementation of gender-based safety audit initiatives through the corporate departmental budget process beginning in 2026 and beyond, and that staff be directed to report back to the Emergency and Community Services Committee in Q3 2026 with a progress update on the implementation of the action plan. Now I'll turn it over to Ali.
Okay. There are 4 high-level themes that were identified in the audit and have guided the development of the action plan. These include training and education, public safety and security infrastructure, accessibility in transit, sidewalks, and roadways, and addressing root causes of safety concerns. Let's delve into the action planning process for the audit. First, we are organizing quarterly cross-departmental meetings. These meetings are crucial as they ensure alignment and collaboration across various city departments. Next, we conducted one-on-one meetings with each division. The goal here is to identify specific initiatives, gaps, and opportunities for improvement. We're also consulting with key community stakeholders, including the Hamilton Public Library, Hamilton Police Services, and community leaders. This collaboration helps us outline critical actions and ensures that our approach is comprehensive and inclusive. Oh, no, sorry. Another key point is identifying champions within the city. These individuals will play a significant role in driving the audit forward. Finally, we're developing a robust communication strategy. This will help us promote the progress of the initiative and keep everyone informed and engaged. We have developed a draft action plan that includes clear timelines and necessary resources to achieve our goals. More work is needed to further engage the community and determine how we will invest in new initiatives. I'll turn it over now to Peter.
So let's focus on where we stand with the gender-based safety audit within the city. We've identified 191 activities across 13 divisions that align with the audit's recommendations. Of these, 87% are either ongoing or planned under existing strategies. This shows significant alignment and commitment to our current plans. Meanwhile, 13% of activities are new initiatives specifically implemented in response to the gender-based safety audit. This highlights our proactive approach to address emerging needs. Let's explore the gaps identified through our consultation with the various city divisions. Firstly, under training and education, de-escalation and self-defense training for city staff, ensuring they have the skills needed to manage potentially volatile situations safely is not fully implemented yet. Additionally, similar training requirements for third-party contractors is not currently underway, but would raise our overall safety standards. Next, as part of our public safety and security infrastructure improvements, one significant step is installing emergency call buttons at strategic public locations. These will serve as immediate lifelines in emergencies. It was also mentioned that raising awareness about the heightened vulnerability of disabled and immunocompromised individuals to infectious diseases would offer a community-wide effort in protective measures. Addressing the root causes of safety, we see gaps in two areas: local health care support and mental health and grief support. This is about creating a supportive environment that promotes healing and resilience within our community. Finally, resourcing is essential. The current staff model supporting the GBSA is temporarily funded. This role is responsible for the backbone support of the initiative, which includes coordinating across all departments to effectively advance this work. This ensures that every step forward is strategic, well-resourced, and impactful. These initiatives are more than mere actions, though. They are our commitment to fostering a safer, more inclusive community. In the course of the initial action planning phase, we were encouraged to learn that a lot of great work is underway across the corporation that aligns with the recommendations of the audit. A number of promising practices and opportunities to enhance the work underway also emerged. Today, we are excited to share with you a few examples of this work.
In recreation, currently underway and was well supported by the GBSA was to offer gender-based programming for women and girls and to continue with spaces and programs for women and girls. And we're pleased that this fall we are offering a Women and Girls Open Gym. And so we continue to look at program opportunities where women and girls programs may be valuable to the community. One opportunity that's been identified that we'll continue to look at and strive towards is to launch a Women and Girls Sport campaign, Women and Girls in Sport campaign with opportunities for mentoring, scholarships, and promotion across Hamilton.
In transit, we consistently say that safety is a top priority for customers and staff. To support the audit, already underway are public awareness efforts on transit safety. The audit was very helpful to identify ways in which we can augment various customer education and orientation programs. There are always new customers to transit that can benefit from a rundown of our safety programs, and seasoned customers can benefit as well. For example, HSR is doubling efforts to promote the Courtesy Stop program, which allows customers to request a non-stop after 8 p.m. for all regular routes. While the information has been on our website for quite some time, we have added it to our social media and to our communication materials, including bus news and outreach at post-secondary schools. In addition, we continue to promote the Speak Up, Speak Out poster campaign that launched in 2023, so customers may report crimes directly to police. These posters are on every bus, or should be on every bus, and have a handy QR code for quick reporting. We are also reminding customers that they can notify the operator regarding any safety issue or emergency, and the operator can contact dispatch using their radio, which are on board every bus. The audit also presented an opportunity to enhance public safety through the upcoming HSR Wayfinding Strategy. The Wayfinding Project is a sibling project to the upcoming Transit Growth Plan that implements the re-envisioned bus network, and it's a great opportunity to update signage and improve wayfinding in general. The recommendations from the audit that include having maps at shelters and improved accessibility and various other components will be achieved through projects such as the digital ink displays and solar lighting at stops. These projects will be pulled into the wayfinding implementation after successful pilots. Transit will be sure to consult with our customers and community and will follow all corporate accessibility standards. Now over to transportation.
Hi, Councillors. Just on this past Tuesday at Public Works Committee, we had 2 transportation reports that had, for one of the first times, an equity lens that was embedded within decision-making of those 2 reports. That's a really important evolution for the way that we're looking at transportation in the city, making sure we're looking at the groups who perhaps are most impacted by traffic collisions in the city and making sure that when we're making decisions that we're protecting the interests of those people. That's why the GPSA audit and that type of work is really important, because it contributes to our understanding in transportation of what type of factors that we need to consider when we're making those decisions. On your screen, you have a couple different things that we're doing today that I'm sure all councillors are kind of familiar with, how we're installing more pedestrian crossovers. We're doing different signals. Sorry, you can see, yep, sorry. We're installing signals that have that in mind. But we're starting to layer in equity-based decision factors within the traditional technical ways that we look at these things, so that we can have another factor in there that's taking that into consideration. One of the things that we see an opportunity is, while we talk about installing all of new traffic signals, all that sort of thing, is that everyone understands that there's some degree of or perceived or real risk at night. So we want to make sure that we're also considering the environment where this infrastructure exists, and enhanced lighting in this example to ensure that it's complementary to those things that people can feel comfortable in public spaces as well, and that it actually contributes to their enjoyment of those spaces, but legitimately improves their safety. So with that, I'll pass it over to Peter in Culture and Tourism.
Thank you, Mike. So right now, as some of you may know, we are running the placemaking grant program for the downtown. And so that is an $80,000 budget, which was distributed to over 11 groups. And so these grants ranged in size from, say, $3,000 to up to $15,000. And about half of them have already run. Some of them have been taking place in a lot of public spaces. So for example, John and Rebecca Park, Ferguson Station along King William. The benefit of these is that by offering this money to the community and for these groups to come out and self-identify, is that they end up taking these spaces and getting a sense of ownership and authorship over them. And so it brings people out. We create these events that bring the community to appreciate these spaces, consider them anew, and think of them differently, but also to provide safety in that you have people there and also people feel attached to a space. And that's key to getting people to remain in a space, to keep coming back to it. So besides the grant program, we've also been running, for example, the King William shutdown, and part of that was also a lighting project which adheres to many of the CEPTED principles that were addressed within the gender-based safety audit. And then coming up, we're also hoping to run a program along James Street, which would be focusing on vacant storefronts or underutilized storefronts to get to combine with artists to have art put in those storefronts in order to activate it and to provide a sense that there's something going on, to make James Street a gallery, which would also correspond with both the Super Crawl weekend, which is coming up, and then also the art crawl that happens along there. And it was traditionally the gallery district within Hamilton. So these are some of the initiatives, and of course there are many more. Thank you. So this is just a small sample of the work underway. There are a significant number of niches that are both underway, planned, and opportunities to consider for enhancements. In order to determine how we will decide what projects move forward and how to make investments, we have developed a set of decision-making criteria.
Okay, so let's delve into our proposed decision-making criteria that you have on the screen there. That criteria is obviously for the gender-based safety audit. These criteria are designed to ensure that our actions are both impactful and aligned with our council's priorities. The idea is that criterion guides decisions for investments in new initiatives. It serves as a tool or framework that would be used by city divisions. So first, we have council priorities. This means that any action taken should align with our strategic goals and commitment. It's essential that we work towards what Council has set as a priority. Oop, did I just change? Sorry. Next, we consider urgency. We aim to address high-risk safety concerns that data or lived experiences have flagged as immediate needs. This ensures that we're responsive to the most pressing needs. Feasibility is another key criterion. We must assess if initiative is realistic to implement, given our current resources and constraints. It's about balancing ambition with practicality. Then there's the return on investment. We're looking for actions that deliver strong impacts relative to cost. This includes improving safety and building trust within the community. And last, we emphasize equity and inclusion. We need to center lived experiences to reduce systemic barriers and enhance safety for equity-deserving groups. This is crucial for fostering a more inclusive community. These criterion provide a comprehensive framework to guide our decision-making, ensuring that our efforts are both effective and equitable. As we move forward with our community strategies, let's look at the essential next steps that will solidify our commitment to creating healthy and safe communities. First, internal engagement is crucial. We'll be expanding our outreach across city divisions to ensure everyone is informed and involved in our action plan. This collective effort will bring diverse perspectives and ideas to the table. Next, we'll be forging strong partnerships with community organizations. By collaborating on shared safety goals, we can leverage each other's strengths and resources, creating a more substantial impact together. Community outreach is another vital step. Engaging with residents allows us to align our actions with the lived experiences of those we serve. This will help create a more relevant and effective initiative or initiatives. In terms of addressing gender-based violence, we'll be working closely with the Women Abused Work Group. Our goal is to update training, refine strategies, and ensure our efforts are in sync with providing comprehensive support and solutions. Finally, we'll prioritize actions using our established criteria. This will ensure our focus on high-impact safety initiatives that truly make differences in our community's well-being. Together, by following these steps, we can create a safer, more inclusive environment that reflects our shared vision and values. And with that, that's the end of the presentation, and thank you so much for listening.
Thank you to our champion team across divisions for your presentation. Really appreciate it. Committee members, the floor is open for speakers list. First up, we have Councillor Kretsch, followed by Councillor Alex Wilson, and then followed by Councillor Huang. Also want to acknowledge that we have non-committee members joining us. Councillor McMeekin, Councillor Maureen Wilson, the mayor has joined us, and Councillor Kassar as well. Thank you. So first up, if I lost in that listing of names, Councillor Kretsch, you're on the speakers list. Go.
Yeah, Councillor Maureen Wilson is a committee member, just to say.
My apologies. Councillor Taddison, I already mentioned him when he walked in the room.
Nobody died, I was just letting you know.
My bad. Thank you for correcting the public record. My apologies, Councillor Maureen Wilson.
She's still intact. My question is really just simple. Thank you for this work. I think it's very important. I'm glad to see that we're at this stage. When I look at the next steps, I don't see any dates attached to those steps. And I think for many of us, especially the last one on the list, is something we spent the morning talking about, is something that I think Councillor Maureen Wilson put a motion about, probably in 2022. If that strikes me as probably the correct time. 4 years later, we're not really seeing anything in terms of being farther ahead in terms of how gender lens is being applied to our budgeting process. And so I think it's really important for us to understand what the approximate timelines are for these things, what that looks like, and if this our report is coming back that we can have that really clearly, like we're projecting Q1 of this year, and we're projecting this to be done, because I think that these things are very urgent, and every year that goes by where this doesn't happen, we're leaving people behind.
Through the chair. So I think I'll start off by sharing that embedding a gender-based lens into our budgeting process is a journey that we're on. There were steps that we started to take last year with identifying and building it into the budget process through budget presentations to identify areas where we are making investments in some of these areas. This work, I think, is a good step in terms of continuing that, but we recognize it's going to take us some time to get there and fully implement it. And I don't think there'll be a finishing point at which we can check off and say that we're done. It really is a continual journey. But we are envisioning this as a great way for us to, through the recommendations that have been put forward, direct staff to prioritize these through existing budget processes. And then we'll also look at, through our budget process this year, to be highlighting some of the areas where we have already made investments in this area and where there's opportunities going forward.
Yeah, and I appreciate that answer. And respectfully, what I want to say is we need a date. Like, I understand that we want to do this, that we're on a journey. I think we're all on different journeys, and that's, of course, the nature of all work, is that we're on a journey to the completion of the work. But I really think in a short amount of time for the next CCS, we need to be able to say how we're going to be applying a gender perspective, I would say. I don't personally like the word lens. I think it kind of obfuscates the point. But if we're going to look at this from the perspective of gender, it's not just about highlighting things that are quote unquote in a category called gender in the budget. Well, this thing is going to improve issues for women. Look, we talk about the sidewalk improvements we're doing. We could talk about how disproportionately women and children are impacted by those situations where sidewalks are not in good repair. That could be a way of understanding it. But that's not the task. The task is actually approaching budgeting from the perspective of considering how people of diverse genders are experiencing the world and where those places need to be prioritized in budgets. And so, yes, I understand that we're on a journey. I'm just really flagging the point that Councillor Maureen Wilson and others have been asking about this for a lot longer than 4 years. And I hear from many, many women in our community and gender diverse folks in our community who are asking for more attention to this and just to make sure the city is prioritizing it. This is helpful, but until we actually see it show up as a way the budget is understood and talked about, until we start seeing the language around our budgets change, it doesn't really matter. Because that's where it comes to us making decisions, and that's how we're going to be able to receive and understand those decisions. Right now, none of those decisions are being put forward in front of us from that perspective. And so that's the most crucial part of this, not identifying what work we're doing, from my perspective.
Thank you, Councillor. Staff response? Yep.
Through the chair. So certainly I think we will be doing some of that work through the 2026 budget, but I would say in terms of a realistic timeframe, we are looking at embedding it throughout 2026 and 2027 to be able to bring something back.
Thanks, and I would ask that when this issue is raised again, or if you can report in the future, having that in writing somewhere concretely, what these next steps, all of the next steps. I picked only one because it was topical for today, and also I only have so much speaking time. And so all these next steps, I think, need to have dates assigned to them, and then if those dates need to change for reasons, we can talk about that, obviously, as a committee, but I think we need to have that in front of us to know when these things are going to happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Councillor Alex Wilson.
Thank you. Really appreciating the list, and I think it gives us some focus. I think one of the questions similarly that I have is having a list of 187 actions plus is a lot. And then understanding about how that work is happening, how we've held ourselves as decision makers accountable to that work going forward, but also just communicating what's the priority right now in a list that's so big, and some of that work is internal as well. And so we're also building capacity as an organization, and maybe I'll frame this in that kind of language of maturity, as if this is where we are kind of in year 0 of this plan, maybe either Rochelle or Director Chase, are you able to maybe set expectations about how will next year's update be different? Like where are we hoping to be with that? So some of the things I have questions on are 47% of these, sorry, not 47%, 47 of these actions are, where do we do training right now in the city? What are our goals for that training? How do we know which divisions need what? Is that something that'll be forward next year? Is better understanding where we're trying to go with training, what the gaps are that we're trying to close. I'm just trying to better understand how we measure success across 200 different priorities, some of them very small and ongoing and not going to be visible to the public. Some of them investments in community, like you now have charging stations on your bus and there's dollars associated with those as well. And so I focused it on training to maybe give a more specific example, but I'm trying to understand more generally, where are we going to be next year? What does this report look like, whether it's in terms of, as Councillor Crutch was talking about, dates on those next steps, budgets, or priority items? Those are some of the things I'm just trying to understand, where will we be?
Thank you. Through the chair, I'm happy to start the response. So next year, we will be coming back with greater depth in terms of new initiatives that the city might take on, as well as what the community is doing. I think a really key component of the initiative is that not only is the city of Hamilton responsible for taking a gender-based safety lens perspective, but also the community, and working really closely with organizations to understand how that can be implemented in the community. So that is certainly a component that you'll see there. We did put forward a decision-making criteria to help us make decisions around what initiatives we'll be looking at, and I do believe that that criteria will guide the measurement of this initiative. So I am hearing that we want to make sure that accountability is definitely embedded in the initiative, and so coming back in a year from now, we will certainly have greater detail with timelines and percentage in terms of progress of the initiative.
So it's fair to suggest that, prioritization of those activities would have occurred by the next step. Like, as one of the benchmarks that were going to happen, next step was prioritization. The hope is that that next step is completed by next year currently. Is that a fair summary? Or of many actions would be prioritized if there's some that can't be?
Through the chair, that would be our goal. We've had 6 months since we received the audit from the YWCA and put forward nearly 200 activities with the city. And with a year's time to come back, I do feel that's possible.
Thank you. Just another, I think, question from myself is, and I'll use the Biodiversity Action Plan as an example, because that's another community-wide strategy where we want to showcase what the community is doing in addition to our own strategic efforts. So it's important to say, here is the native plant garden that your neighbors are planting. You should do that too. Here's a champion. These folks are investing in safety measures at their workplace. Let's shout out this corporate or employer. These people are doing this in their local park. Let's shout out this community group. I definitely appreciate that. There's also a need in this strategy not only to be, I guess, promotional or encouraging of a cultural shift through all of these actions, but also to be very strategic and intentional about what we're trying to achieve to actually make a dent. And I guess that's the bit that I'm trying to, I understand right now we're at the earlier stages, so we have more of the kind of cloud of 200 actions, but what does that balance look like in this plan moving forward? And how do we know what this kind of the strategic citywide priority objectives are and how we're measuring success there? And then these are things that are still helpful, they're still important, and they should still happen. And maybe they're more promotional, or we're trying to get more buy-in at the cultural level there. Because we can't do 200 things all simultaneously. So I am trying to just get a sense of what are maybe those key priorities in this list, or those key areas where the city's going to be more of a force, or yeah.
Through the chair, I would say that the decision-making criteria that we put forward really is what we will be going back to lean on in terms of how do we align the decisions of investment and initiatives that we go forward with. So you saw something around council priorities, the feasibility. Those are all things that we need to consider as we prioritize the initiatives moving forward. The action plan that we presented today really showcases the work that was underway and some that were sparked, but this was work that the city was already planning to do, which is fantastic to see, and lots of momentum. So there is the culture shift, but we are looking to strategize in terms of those key decision-making criteria moving forward, what initiatives we invest in.
Thank you. I heard the dings, so I'll stop there, but really appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Next up, we have Councillor Huang, followed by Councillor Maureen Wilson, who's a good standing ECS member, followed by Vice Chair Clark, and then myself and our non-committee members who are in the room. If you have questions, please indicate to the LC and we'll add you to the list.
Thank you. You have already answered these questions by two other councillors, but here I want to add my third point of what does success look like? So I think that I don't want to ask you to answer it again because you've answered it twice before, but I think that that's a core question that feels like it still hasn't been exactly answered by the documents that you've provided here. So Rochelle, thank you so much for your answers. I'm just saying that I think next presentation, a slide or some sort of document that speaks about here's where we were, here's where we're at, here's where we're going to be. I think that that will be helpful in how we speak about this externally. My other question is, hearing the delegate this morning speak about trans people, and I hope that staff have taken that into account as well. And so moving forward, we will also incorporate that level of feedback or that sort of integration into this work as well. So I just wanted to get a sense from you about what did you hear from this delegate and how are you going to incorporate this into the work moving forward?
Through the chair, we're so pleased that Helena did come forward today to bring and voice the concerns around safety for trans people in our community. So very appreciative of that perspective. We know that there's more engagement that we need to do with the LGBTQS community. And so that is certainly a part of our external engagement plan. And so we will be reaching out to Helena and others that would like to be involved in that. We take that delegation seriously, and I know our colleagues in Recreation are already thinking about ways that they can mobilize what they just heard too.
Okay, thank you. My last question through you, Chair, is around the communications plan for this, because this is a citywide initiative. So I'm interested in understanding, how do we want to package this? How do we want to speak about this? Because we just spent an entire morning talking about budget, of which the perspective wasn't brought forward in that way. So I'd like to get a better sense, or maybe just your collective brain power on how do we speak about this and normalize that sort of conversation in the public.
Through the chair, the communication strategy has just started, I would say, and so we're in communication with staff, not only in the city manager's office, but across the corporation. There are communications teams that are doing great work attached to the initiatives that you see in that action plan. So we're just in the early stages of that. The approach that we've taken so far is that there's a lot of good work that's happening, and we really want to build off of that momentum. So we will be highlighting the work that you see across the corporation as an initial start to that, but we will be refining and seeing what efforts we need to prioritize in the next 6 months, likely.
Thank you. Those are all my questions, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Wang. Councillor White, or Councillor Wilson?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for all this work. Just some very, I have some very specific questions. But I think I'd rather spend my time just focusing more on the more macro approach of the application of a gender perspective. And I don't mean this as a criticism. I hope that we're always on a journey of learning. But there are some things that have been known for some time about the needs of, in this case, people who identify as women. And it is specifically and directly related to what is safety. Why are women more unsafe than men? Part of the rationale, or part of the reason that women have always been more unsafe, is because we still make less money. Our economic vulnerability makes us more dependent on perhaps those who would seek to hurt us and abuse us. If we know, for example, that over 66% of riders on public transit are women, we know that. We have known that for a long time. If we know that vulnerability and safety is tied to economic vulnerability, and I am going to put my budget hat, and I am getting to maybe a point here, is that I think time is of the essence. We heard this morning in budget deliberations that there's really only 2 projects up for master plan that could affect the budget significantly, one being transit and the other being recreation. So let's step back for a minute and talk about transit. If we seek to globally advance if we seek to make life for women safer, we must necessarily make life for women more economically stable and secure. How do we do that? We enhance and provide for their mobility so that they're not, if they do not choose to be, they're not having to stay at home because home might be unsafe. They're not having to stay in a relationship because they cannot afford their own place. They might be able to do all those things and avoid or leave abuse if they could actually be more economically independent. And I think that is, I wasn't expecting an overall gender perspective to the budget, but I was expecting something. And that is within arm's reach. That's factually correct knowledge and understanding that we have had. And I think therein, I absolutely appreciate all of the measures, the pedestrian crosswalks, the women-only gym time, extremely important. But fundamentally, the absence of violence and the provision of safety is rooted in economic stability and independence. I'll just leave that with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chair. So when you said early in the presentation there was 191, I think, activities underway, is Appendix A list of those activities? So as I'm going through it, I would determine that not all of it is gender-based safety. Some of them seem to be routine services that we would offer automatically. And so is it fair to say that this is a community safety and well-being plan that's merged with the gender-based safety audit action plan? Because when I'm looking at this, there are some things here that just don't line up for me. And I'm curious about it.
Councillor Clark, would you have an example just to help
I'm
along
just
with the question?
pulling a few up right now.
Okay, we'll go nice and slow.
One here is natural surveillance features and improved line of sight through vegetation management. We do that. Seeding, shade, and paths for caregivers and seniors. We do that. Expanding the urban tree canopy. We're doing that. And I'm struggling to see how it connects to what is ostensibly was supposed to be a gender-based safety action plan.
I see a lot of shifting in seats and motion towards, so if you want to start, Michelle, and if anybody else, just please indicate, and I'm happy to have folks comment.
Thank you through the chair. So you are correct that the action plan does present many initiatives, core programming that is delivered regularly by the City of Hamilton. The really good news is that 87% of the initiatives that you see on that action plan are typically delivered by the city, and they align with the audit findings that we had. There are 13% of the initiatives that are in the action plan that are new or that were inspired by the audit recommendations. So there is a smaller number on that action plan right now that is a result of the audit, but we are looking to expand that perhaps down the road.
Director Chase?
So to,
Oh, 1 second, Councillor Clark, we have other responses.
I was just going to expand on Rochelle's response. So I do want to address your one question about the connection to community safety and well-being. You're absolutely correct. This is connected to broader community safety and well-being, and that's why we have purposely, the same team that is working on community safety and well-being plan has been tasked with doing the gender-based safety audit work, and that is quite purposeful because we know that there is a very strong linkage there. I think the other thing that's really important to keep in mind is that when you look at the recommendations and the actions, some of them sound very specific to gender specific. So I'll use the rec example around gender-based programming and recreation center. Very easy to make the linkage there. Some of them sound more broad than that. And I think that's quite purposeful because I think it's important for us to keep in mind when we heard back from the audit and the work that the YWCA did, often when we're addressing safety concerns for women, it also addresses safety concerns for our broader community. And so it may not sound like they're directly connected to the gender-based safety audit, but that is because we know that when we're addressing those safety issues for women, we often are addressing safety issues for our broader community as well.
Thank you. So I thought I heard that 87% is already complete, or 87% are things that the city is already doing. Is that correct?
Through the chair, 87% I would say is either ongoing, complete, or has been planned for already in existing strategies. So it is a bit of a combination. They're not all fully complete, but there are plans underway to implement them.
And 13% are new initiatives specific to gender-based safety audit.
Through the chair, that's correct as a result of the audit.
So I'm not sure how I should take that. Should I take that that's a very positive thing, that we were already on this train track and we've now caught up with everybody else? It's challenging because the gender-based safety audit was supposed to present ideas to provide safety. We have 191 of them, but 87% are already completed or on their way to being completed. So they really didn't come out of the gender-based safety audit. This was work the city was already doing that we have now merged with the gender safety audit, which gives us a community safety and gender-based safety audit. Is that a fair way to describe what's transpired?
Through the chair, I think the 87% demonstrates that we're not starting from scratch. There's a foundation on which we can build on, but absolutely we recognize that there's still work that needs to be done, and there are a number of actions, 13% in particular, that have directly come out of the audit that will be new work.
Thank you.
Thank you. And if I could, Councillor Clark, as Vice Chair, just hold on to the microphone. I had a couple quick questions as Chair. So through you, if I could, in terms of the strategic decision-making criteria, really appreciating having a framework for decisions. I just wanted to hear a little bit about the urgency in terms of addressing immediate or high-risk safety concerns identified through data or lived experience. Could somebody on the team please talk a little bit about what data is used to assess the urgency of safety?
Who wants to start?
I know.
I'll point to you
Okay,
first.
that sounds good. Thank you, through the chair. You're correct. The decision-making criteria does include the equity and inclusion component. It really talks about how can we center lived experience. And so for this work, it really is about the engagement with different groups of people across the city. We do have some data in terms of engagements that have happened over time, but we are looking at new information that would come in as well.
And if I could, through you, Chair, appreciate the response on equity and inclusion. My question was around urgency related to safety. That's okay. So what data are we using to assess the high risk level of a safety concern that's either been raised in our community or that has been identified through the work of the community or the city? Thank you.
Michelle.
Through the chair, I'll get us started. Just in terms of high-risk data, we are looking to our data dashboard that we are creating at the moment. When we look at safety concerns, they are primarily around different crimes, around hate, violence, And so there are different indicators that we're looking at. The criteria that is put forward today in this report has been improved in principle. And so we are in the development phase of all of the details around the framework that will really guide this. So there is more work to be done on this. It's a starting point.
Great. And then through you, Vice Chair, an example being, let's say, there's been an express documented concern coming through multiple councillors' offices about the experience of lack of safety and or occurrences of violence that take place in our alleyways. Our alleyways, as we know from an asset management perspective, some of which are assumed, some are unassumed, some of them have a little bit of money to be invested in infrastructure-wise, most of them don't. Most of them are at the bottom of the priority list in terms of operational service and let alone capital investment, right? So when we have members in our community expressing that they feel very unsafe in their alleyways, or the alleyways have themselves become a conduit of violence in our communities. And I hear Manager Field talk about lighting as being an important thing that we can integrate into our pedestrian crossing, recognizing that safety isn't just the infrastructure of being able to cross the streets, but being able to be seen crossing the street. How does that apply to alleyways? I know that's a very specific one, but I think it kind of sheds light on ongoing experience and might give staff an opportunity to talk about how the data set, priority, and integration around funding happens too. Thank you.
Mike Field, please.
Thank you. I think maybe I can provide a transportation-based example, building on the two reports that went forward on this past Tuesday at Public Works Committee. One of them is about how we apply no turn on right restrictions, leading pedestrian intervals, and leading cyclist intervals. And part of within that framework, we have a guideline where we're using this guideline to prioritize, to examine and prioritize locations based on a number of factors. Some of them hardcore transportation related data, how many cars, whether there's a collision, but there's an equity lens there that we're applying to, where we're looking at, we're building on this, but we're using geographic information, census-based information to start developing where people live, where populations that are at risk live. And Councillor Maureen Wilson made a reference to transit, for example, where we know that that women rely on transit much more than men do. So when we're making those decisions and built in that criteria, we're looking at where, is there concentrations of these populations that live, that when we're going to install a new traffic signal, and I'll use an example of a neighborhood that's not at risk and versus a neighborhood that is risk. Say all the traffic and the technical data are identical. We have another lens now, or not a lens, but another way to embed a decision saying, well, if this area has a higher concentration of vulnerabilities in it, we're going to do this first before we do this one. So maybe that's a real world example in transportation that we're leveraging this kind of data to help us with our decision making and trying to integrate that into the ways that we've been making things in the past that are more strictly technical based, but now we're putting those, as Rochelle mentioned, lived experiences, trying to make sure that that's considered, and altering the prioritization, the order of things that we're doing, and from a budgeting perspective, what we're actually investing in, making sure that that aligns with what we're choosing to build in transportation over another item. I hope that's helpful.
Thank you. General Manager Mader, you had something else to offer?
Yeah, I just wanted to take this opportunity through the chair to expand and build on Mike's example there, is that we are not starting from scratch. There are so many different plans that are already in existence, and what we're trying to do is to put this lens on each and every one of those plans so that this is front and center on those decisions under those plans, and knit that together instead of it being an add-on maybe. So that's what that example does, is that it is being embedded in that, and so we can use that as our base and our ground and then move and improve upon that. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll go offline with a deep dive on alleys and see how it might integrate into future works. I'll take back the chair. Councillor Clark for second time.
Yes, please. And it's just a question, since we have an inspector present. I'm curious how the police will take this data and use it to inform their work that they're doing.
Hi, can you hear me all right?
Yes?
Okay, perfect. Good afternoon. Frank Michoni. I'm from the Community Safety Division with the Hamilton Police. We've been working very closely with this team, and we're doing the gender-based safety audit. So we've incorporated a lot of our interactions and conversations about some of these items that we're doing. So to your question, I think you're saying how are we taking this information and working with it from our end. I think it's a back and forth, and we're working on both sides. Certainly, when we talk about traffic collision sites or we talk about crime information analytics, we are connecting our analytics team with this team, and they're gaining some data from that. So it is a bit of back and forth, and that's as general I can answer that. Is there more specific areas you're looking for?
No, but gender-based safety has been an issue for a few years in our community. And I was just curious how the police interpreted this information and then take it back to the police. How do you train officers? How do you ensure officers are aware of the information that we have? It would be a shame if the information that we have here falls in a waste bin and isn't dealt with. So just curious how the police takes this information and will use it to inform the behaviors of their police officers, the knowledge of their police officers when it comes to gender-based safety.
Yeah, and that's a great question, Councillor. Thank you for that. And I think it's important that we do talk about some of the work that's already been done and some of the training the officers currently receive within their what we call block training, which is a yearly training they attend. And a lot of these topics, when it comes to gender topics and other safety issues within the city, are addressed at the block training. But more importantly, on a daily basis, the officers have what's called a crime manager, and the crime managers brief the officers or with the officers on the briefings as they come into every shift, and they will be able to talk about trends. They'll be able to talk about safety issues within the community that are popping up or continuing, and what we call quote unquote hotspots or project areas that we need to address more and put more concerns into. So that conversation is always going on, and it's going on a regular basis, and those crime managers are very in tune to what is happening in this committee particularly, but also other areas of the city that need addressing by police.
Thank you, Chair, and I'm happy that the inspector has provided some input into this so that we have a good understanding of not only how our audit came about, but how they're interpreting it into their day-to-day interactions with folks. So I think it's important. Thank you for giving me that time to ask that question.
Thank you. And that exhausts our speakers list. Elsie Versace, I forgot to get a mover and seconder to receive the report and the presentation, receive the presentation, approve the reports before I opened up the speakers list. So my bad. If I could please get that now. Councillor Huang and Councillor Crutch, thank you both. And now it's before committee for vote. Thank you. Thank you again to the champion cross-divisional team for your presentation and everybody behind the scenes who helped get the report to this level of recommendations. Thank you. That carries, and thank you also to our YW partners who stayed present for the presentation and dialogue. Next up is 8.2 HSC 250029, Recreation Master Plan Implementation Strategy. Before we begin the presentation, I'm going to need a mover and seconder to suspend the rules of order in order to allow the staff team that'll be presenting an additional 10 minutes, so in total we'll have a 15-minute presentation. Moved by Councillor Huang, second by Councillor Jackson enthusiastically. That will require an electronic vote, please. That carries, thank you. And acknowledging Councillor Beatty has joined us as well for this presentation as well. Okay, as it is getting loaded up technically, I will be calling on Steve Savor, who is our Director of Recreation, Healthy and Safe Communities, to introduce today's presentation. Please, over to you, Director.
Through you, Chair Nan, thank you very much. Good afternoon, committee members, members of council. My name is Steve Savor, and I'm the Acting Director of Recreation. And I'm joined at the podium today by another Steve, just to make it easier for you. Mr. Steve Langlois from Monteith Brown Planning Consultants is no stranger to the city, having worked with us on our previous outdoor and indoor studies. He's been involved in many master plans and implementation strategies for various municipalities. Today, Steve will be taking us through the presentation to speak directly about the implementation strategy that they developed with support from staff in various divisions. Before I turn the presentation over to Steve, I wanted to take a moment to provide some opening remarks. Firstly, I want to thank you all for providing us an opportunity to present today, and to first and foremost thank our staff who have been very busy over the last number of years, and who have contributed not only to this report and staff presentation, but all the work throughout the number of years. We are pleased and really excited to be able to take the next steps within our recreation master plan that was approved in 2022. While our master plan identifies 85 recommendations for which we continue to work on, this presentation and staff report focuses on the strategies necessary to address our infrastructure gaps and associated funding solution from a recreation perspective. It's important to note that we're not intending to revisit the master plan that has already been approved. Rather, we're here to focus on the required implementation strategy necessary for the capital recreation amenities and for the city to move forward in this area. For context, when we speak about the recreation master plan and the implementation strategy, we're not solely focused on the recreation division. We speak to the broader term of recreation, which represents sport, leisure activities, and also includes our outdoor park amenities. We would like to thank the additional council members for their attendance today. This is definitely an important topic for our city, and we know at times we will be having difficult discussions in light of the various pressures that we face in the city. Today is not about laser focusing on specific projects, but rather about a citywide approach to how we will deal with those projects. We have provided our best professional advice. However, this will be your opportunity to discuss our strategic recreational infrastructure needs. We believe that we have assembled a great deal of information in this regard to support your discussions and ultimately your decisions. We're looking forward to receiving any relevant direction as a result of today's discussion. So with that said, I'd like to turn the presentation over to Steve Langlois to present our implementation strategy.
Thank you, Steve. And thank you, Madam Chair, members of committee, and members of council that are sitting in on this presentation. It's my distinct pleasure to be here today. I've about 20 slides or so to present, so I will jump right in on that. I look forward to any comments that you may have at the end. Let's see if we're advancing. Okay, sorry, my technical spacebar. Try that. And we're off. Thank you. In 2022, City Council approved a comprehensive recreation master plan. You'll see this referred to as the RMP to guide provision of recreation and park facilities to the year 2051. This implementation strategy is a detailed roadmap
for that RMP, provides recommendations related to major capital projects that were outlined in that project for about the next 10 to 15 to 20 years of that particular time frame, including project sequencing. So the purpose of my presentation today is on that RMP-IS, the implementation strategy, and would note that it does only assess those council-approved projects that were in the council-approved RMP, does not consider new projects, as was mentioned. There we go. Here's a bit more about our journey. The RMP was informed by an extensive public engagement program. It was approved by Council in August 2022. Subsequently, this implementation strategy process was initiated early last year to help put the city's RMP into action. Work has since been completed in a phased manner with an update to Council of November of last year, and we're pleased to be before you today to seek approval of the full study. Our scope includes both recreation facilities and parks facilities. And when we're talking recreation facilities, there's a real focus on your community recreation centers, or the powerhouse of your recreation system. Those include things like pools, gyms, senior spaces. Many include arenas as well. You have standalone arenas, as well as outdoor pools. From a parks perspective, focuses around items such as sports fields, sports courts, and other park amenities, spray pads, skate parks, and so on. There are key differences between the two studies, and each delivering important directions that will guide investment within the recreation and park sphere. The 2022 RMP had an extensive engagement program. It was also built off of demographics and usage trends, which have been since updated through this process. And it really resulted in the identification of provision targets and planning targets to look at where investment could be structured across the city. Through this work, there were a number of other strategic directions and recommendations. And although the RMP was a snapshot in time, it does include a lot of different factors that need to be contemplated over the course of time. So it's still a very much a relevant document for your community. The implementation strategy builds upon this work by identifying next steps that are grounded within an evidence-based framework. Supported by community input, demographic data, asset inventories, usage rates, and municipal benchmarking, facility condition, asset management data, quite a bit of information went into this process. This study provides prioritized criteria for these capital projects, so you'll see some sequencing, proposed sequencing, timing, other strategies to help optimize our investment in our assets, and other guidelines and considerations as the city moves forward with implementing this work. Together, these studies provide a depth of analysis, transparency, and rigor in the city's decision-making process for investment through a model that includes both infrastructure-driven and equity-driven factors. The RMP does, and its implementation strategy uses an evidence-based approach that is defined, I think, through the following slide. You'll see the various factors that were considered around those around these steps here, and there were a total of 17 variables. There we go. 17 variables that provide both a qualitative and quantitative analysis. Included within this is public input, which has been derived through the 2022 RMP and more recent projects and initiatives. The equity index in particular, I'll point that out, looks at a variety of factors to help create, to help identify priorities that will have the greatest social impact, whereas the infrastructure index identifies those projects that are most at risk. So think of condition, age, functionality, at risk of failing, at risk of needing even more investment beyond what is currently anticipated through your asset management processes. I want to emphasize that the equity perspectives through this plan are something that we know Council's been very interested in, and we're excited to be able to include them, and I think it adds a lot of strength and credibility to the analysis. Taken together, all of these indicators help us to provide recommendations and priorities for council's consideration that meet the highest and greatest needs across the city. This depth of analysis does have many benefits. It helps us target investment to where it's needed most. It helps to make sure we're making best use of growth-related funds as well as other tax-supported and senior government funds, other partnership opportunities that may arise from time to time. It's also a very dynamic tool. It doesn't need to be static. The process itself has been completed for this study, but can be replicated in the future as other needs arise within the city. And I think an important one nowadays is this work also helps to position the city to be grant ready when outside funding does become available. I'd like to start with the output from the analysis for recreation facilities like community centers, pools, and arenas. The strategy assesses two streams of projects, the first one being new facilities. These tend to be growth related and are intended to be queued in step with growth. And existing facilities. This is major revitalization. And what we're talking here is more than just regular repair and replacement. It goes beyond that. These are coordinated, larger scale projects that would involve facility upgrades, potentially improvements, accessibility enhancements, which we know are top of mind for the city. Many may involve planned closures that would last, that could take many months. The intent here is to optimize these facilities to make sure that they're able to serve your residents for another 20 plus years through this work. The investment roadmap shown here provides sequence recommendations for asset disposal, renewal, replacement, and construction. It's divided into 3 to 5 year increments to provide some flexibility in implementation. It's expected that council will make decisions around individual projects through the typical budget process. So by approving this plan today or approving it in principle, you're not necessarily committing to this as a rigid structure, but rather a roadmap and a framework to help with long-term financial planning and to establish a queue that will that staff can help support through their continued work around feasibility planning and site-specific works. Key factors contributing to the sequencing were the previously noted variables of 17 equity and infrastructure-related variables, as well as project readiness. There are certain projects that have been in the queue. Any planned projects, those have been respected, their order within your budget, but having that longer-term view allows us to integrate those factors into the decision-making framework and better align with your funding capabilities. Longer-term projects beyond 2041 are not identified herein, but I would suggest that there are enough projects here to keep folks busy for some time. And again, the intent here for this tool is to allow for continued monitoring and assessment as needed. So that it's a bit easier to decipher, we've taken that roadmap and put it into a total of 4 key next steps. The first one here being really feasibility planning, and some of these items are already in process, but the study itself generally looks to, as a general principle, tries to seek opportunities for co-located municipal services. We've heard from your residents that those are more convenient for them. We know they're economically more efficient. There are some facilities that Eastwood, and you'll see on the next slide others that are have potential for future uses potentially. So doing some more planning around Eastwood Arena, Dundas Community Pool, and Mountain Arena, for example. These are well-used facilities, particularly B and C, that need new life. The second item there is to prioritize the initiation of key capital projects. So many of these are close to ready to go. There's been some business planning already initiated around several of these. So this is sort of the queue of getting shovel ready to move forward with these. starting with Victoria Park Outdoor Pool, Waterdown Recreation Center, Ancaster Seniors Achievement Center. That's an expansion. Not all of these are brand new facilities. Some represent a capacity expansion that can be undertaken or major revitalization. So I'll save you the list there, but I can come back to that if desired. And while it wasn't intentional, I think it's also noteworthy that this does spread investment across the entirety of the city. Continuing on this, identifying alternative programming considerations for selected single-use sites. Again, I've singled out Eastwood Arena. The RMP did speak to some coordinated initiatives to consolidate and maximize impact in particularly the Stoney Creek area, whether it be the Stoney Creek Arena site with the recreation center, the opportunity to add a gymnasium onto that building, Salt Fleet Arena as those uses can be absorbed into a new build, and the same to go with HG Brewster Pool. Community halls, while not delivered and deciphered directly through this plan, the framework that we do provide provides a decision-making criteria that could be used to move forward with evaluation of that. So if you're a more rural councillor or have other community halls within your ward, that's an assessment that would be forthcoming as well. Shifting to facilities in parks, the following objectives were established to help guide our next steps. Prioritizing projects that would have a broad impact. That tends to mean, we hear from the public, park washrooms, playgrounds, and investment in trails, pathways, and other amenities that are all ages, all stages. Renewing aging park amenities that remain in demand. Responding to emerging needs through collaboration, recognizing we can't do it all ourselves, but there are other interested parties that may have some opportunity to assist. Striving to achieve our parkland targets. If we don't have the land, it's hard to address some of the growth that's required, the growth-related infrastructure that's required, and creating and applying decision-making frameworks. Many of those frameworks are in this plan, and I'll speak to one coming up here. So based on input from the community, utilization factors, and related trends, the RMP and this implementation strategy have identified a series of park facility capital priorities. On a citywide basis, our research in your community have told us those in the prioritized column here, artificial turf, cricket fields, I'm cherry picking a few, multi-use courts, skateboard parks, dog off leash. These are the ones we know we'd like to see more of across the city. There may be many areas that have suitable provision, but there are others that do not. Keeping pace, this is, as the city grows, we know we need more community gardens, more bike parks, more pickleball courts, washrooms in parks, and so on. And the last column, while it says reduce, that's strategic, strategic investment or de-investment as opportunities arise, working with the community. No one's taking these facilities out of your parks, but rather we know that the demand is waning for many of these in localized scenarios at the very least, whether that be bocce, lawn bowling, wading pools, for example. So that list has helped us to prioritize where we can go. The report itself recommends 4 key next steps for park facilities. First one being the preparation of a community sport plan. This one very focused on organized sport. We know there are many interests within your community, and demand is high for your sport parks in particular. That would dovetail really with a sport field upgrade plan. While we're not getting the land that we have in the past for these larger land-intensive facilities, the ability to deliver more through lighting, through adding artificial turf in select scenarios, through just strategic investment to make sure that fields are the appropriate dimension that will maximize their use for the community. That allows us to use the land for its highest and best use to serve those needs. Continuing here, initiate a sport park improvement initiative. So we've provided a bit more detail here around two particular areas of interest, being Heritage Green Sports Park and Mohawk Sports Park. Heritage Green has some expansion lands, the ability to add another multi-use artificial turf field and field house is recommended for that site. And all of this work, including all of the previous roadmap around facilities, would involve continued engagement with your community and with involved interest holders. For MSP, there's an opportunity to convert some fields to those that may be in higher demand. Cricket is an area that has been emerging in the city for some time, and trying to find suitable sites for that can be a challenge. Mohawk Sports Park provides an opportunity, but not at the cost of other well-used facilities. Number 4 here, continuing to advance improvements on neighborhood parks as well. So it's not just all about sport, but it's those amenities that are nearest and dearest to people's locations, right? It's the playgrounds that their children use. It's the pathways and their access to them. The ability of these sites to be able to meet those everyday needs needs additional attention. I'm getting to the meat of the matter here. Financial and sustainability review. I want to shift to that. We know that high quality, accessible recreation and community facilities are essential to the well-being of your residents. Full implementation of this plan will require alternative and accelerated funding strategies. And nothing, and I'll show on the next slide the dollars there. This is all information and data that comes out of your council-approved asset management plan. So we want to ensure that alignment. We want to avoid unplanned closures, and we want to be able to ensure that these facilities remain safe and accessible for your residents. I have 3 slides left. I may run into my time here at the discretion of Madam Chair. I'll continue just to illustrate the potential capacity funding needs relative to recreation and parks maintenance and renewal. 3 scenarios are presented. The first being your status quo. So our focus here is really on the level of block funding that's provided for these renewal assets. We know if we maintain current block funding levels that the backlog will continue to grow. We've had some gains with the block over the years, but the cost of work, your inventory, continues to grow. So continuing to fund at this level, in our minds, not sustainable, and will result in continued deterioration of assets and higher probabilities of unplanned closures. So the plan provides 2 additional scenarios, one being one that's a little bit more responsive, which means really addressing the backlog. The backlog is the work that has been set aside. The funding hasn't been there. The coordinated projects haven't been there to tackle the work, but this is the work that is putting facilities most at risk. So increasing block funding to address that, to eliminate that backlog over a course of time. There's an incremental approach you can use to get at that. Whereas scenario 3 is more proactive. It's maintenance sustainability. So it's not just looking at what we haven't done, but it's looking at what we haven't done and what we need to do on a year-to-year basis. These get progressively more expensive, so we recognize there are choices that need to be made. This slide will provide the details around those dollar amounts. The table at the top left there, this shows your current annual block funding amounts for recreation and parks, about $8 million per year to each portfolio. Those are indexed for inflation, so they will go up in future years if council maintains that approach. The status quo doesn't cost us any new dollars, right? That's keeping our block funding levels where it is at. We've split our sort of responsive, that scenario 2, that addressing the backlog, into 2A and 2B, just to provide you a sense of where what the difference may be, and it allows you to address that backlog over a shorter amount of time, which is 2B, or a longer amount of time, which is 2A, and that it defers your investment, but you get an idea of what we're looking for. It's $4.5 million for recreation, it's $2.7 million a year for parks to get us to just that 2A level 2B, it jumps significantly, and to 3, that maintenance sustainability, again, this is addressing your needs as they arise, is in the range of an extra $30 million for recreation and almost $22 million for parks. We provide this information for council's informed decision-making. We really do recommend a scenario within the range between scenarios 2 and 3. We feel that would result in more meaningful investment within your facilities to allow for partial to full implementation of the plan. And we recognize that additional detailed financial planning would be required to flesh that out further based on your direction. And just in closing, there we go. The strategy does present an equity-centered approach to planning and sequencing major capital projects to 2041 and beyond. Staff will use the study to support this evidence-based decisions and staff reports and information that comes before committee and council. Growth-related facility development, which was not part of the financial scenarios I provided earlier, that will continue to occur as development charge funding and other sources becomes available. But we do recognize that accelerated funding is needed to keep pace and/or address maintenance and renewal projects. So lastly, just a reminder that engagement, again, with the community and stakeholders will continue on each of these projects specifically. This is a citywide study, not a site-specific study. So with that, I do thank you for your time. I look forward to any questions you may have.
Thank you so much for that thorough overview. The speakers list is open. Appreciate all the work that went in the background to get this implementation strategy clarified for us. Okay, committee members. First up, we have Councillor Alex Wilson, followed by Councillor Jackson, and then Councillor Crutch.
Thank you. And I'm just going to start by asking to be added for a second time, knowing where this is at. My first question is, and I think it was said by the second Steve, if you will, will continue the trend of deteriorating assets when you were talking about option 1. Are we currently in a trend of deteriorating assets at current funding levels?
Through you, Madam Chair. Through our work over the course of time with the City of Hamilton, we've had the benefit of working on 2009 indoor study, 2011 outdoor study, 2012, and the dollars certainly at that time around asset management were much lower than they are today. I don't have those details. But I know we've seen it even in the course of your last few asset management plans, 2025. Those numbers have been higher than 2026. These are studies that are based on engineering reports, life cycle analysis. The needs are quite varied across your inventory. Certainly we look to indicators like unplanned closures, our ability to not address those needs, not layered into that, and a significant concern is also the barrier-free accessibility of your spaces. So we would point out that that's also not part of that equation and something that is I know top of mind for your community.
And just trying to understand how we got to an over $100 million backlog. I think that's the bit that I'm trying to get to is it just that, oh, well, in 2025, it costs more to replace a rec center, but the right money was there, it's just costs have shifted? Like I'm trying to get a really explicit answer as to when was the last time we weren't growing the deficit? Was that in 2005? Was that pre-2000? Have we always been growing a deficit? Because I think contingent in this is we're setting up a new financing strategy for recreation and parks going forward. What does that look like? And I'd like to better understand maybe the concerns in our existing financing strategy that got us to $100+ million backlog via council approval of budgets year after year. It's not a staff issue. I'm just trying to understand how do we get here today?
Through the chair, I can start and throw to my colleague, Chris Ersteckton's Corporate Facilities and Energy Management. I think in terms of how we got here, we've done a great job from a staff perspective to run our facilities to the best of our ability and to at some times put that Band-Aid on to keep it working. We've had that opportunity to ensure that we're providing the services and programs that we can, but we noticed that with the amount of facilities that we do have, the age of them, specifically from a recreation perspective and the infrastructure, they are coming together in a time in which they are really receiving that need for attention. And we haven't had the investment in the past to be able to keep up to that need from a continual perspective. We've done our best to do that work to keep the facilities running, but not necessarily investing the additional funding and money and time to address the upcoming issues that we do have. Obviously, we have block funding and our maintenance blocks to address the most critical needs, but as we learn year after year, those needs increase and vary from that perspective. So that's a quick snapshot of where we're at. I can throw to our colleague, Chris Hurstek, Director of Energy, to provide
Maybe I'll just, before getting in, I'm hearing that there's three things that have done it. Cost to renew facilities is always higher. Things come up at periods of time. If we build 10 parks in 1 year, 25 years later, we have to replace 10 parks, and the budget just wasn't high enough. Maybe if Director Hurstek's going to weigh in, are those three drivers? Is that an accurate summary?
Through the chair, Chris Hurstek, Acting Director of Corporate Facilities Energy Management. Yes, that's an accurate description, Councillor. I'd also add to what Steve Savor's comments were, is that we have been building a deficit since the early 2000s. I'll reference the 2008-2009 Recreation Master Plan. At that time, our capital in recreation was approximately $3.5 million. That master plan indicated that we needed in between $11 million and $15 million to keep just the facilities that we had active. That's what the dollar figure was annually to keep them in state of good repair. Fortunately, in 2009, we received approximately 11 infrastructure projects. We have $50 million approximately. We did have to find some funding for that, but the following years, our block funding went down to $2 million. So we've been rebuilding it since about 2009 to where we are now at about $8 million. I would suggest that with all of the recreation facilities that we do have, the $8 million block funding is still not adequate enough to keep a state of good repair.
Thank you. I think that's helpful. I heard a ding, so I'm going to just ask a question on this, and then I'll stop there. My question is about block funding. If block funding is part of the way that we got into this situation, why is block funding for capital projects the way we're going to get out of it? I think the piece that I'm not understanding is we don't pay for a wastewater treatment plant via block funding. We pay for a wastewater treatment plant via multi-year budgeting. We set money aside in reserves. We do it differently. There's 2 parks in Flamborough, the Dundas Driving Park, are coming up at their 25-year renewal periods, and there's certainly not block funding to replace all 3 of them in that time period, let alone, we're doing triage work, and I think that's something that we all have examples of. I understand increasing the block funding allows us to better meet the need, but I think a question I have is, to what extent should block funding versus project funding be how we move forward? I understand for operations, there's a need for block funding. For smaller things like maintenance, block funding makes sense. But for major capital investments, is block funding the most we can mitigate risk in doing that planning, or is there ways that we could plan for those investments that would mitigate risk and mitigate these surprises more? I'm just trying to understand that, and then I'm happy to go back on and appreciate all the time and answers. Thank you.
Through the chair, I think this might be more of an appropriate response from our colleagues in finance in terms of, obviously this is, as you did mention, this is one of those options. There are several options that we can consider as well, but in terms of identifying the historical patterns of using block funding and how that can be looked at in different ways, I'll pass that over to Director Kirk Weaver.
Through the chair, Kirk Weaver, Acting Director, Financial Planning, Administration and Policy. Block funding has historically been how the City of Hamilton has provided capital funding from the capital levy as one source of financing. Certainly, we can look at other financing strategies for major capital projects. As you mentioned, we have done that in the past. cash flowing those projects over a number of years when they are significant is an option that we would look at. And I think that some of the scenarios that require further financial analysis that have been presented today, those are some of the options we would look at going forward. Certainly, block funding over the last number of years as well. There was historically, there wasn't an inflationary factor applied, but 2 or 3 budget cycles ago, we did a bit of a catch-up on an inflationary period across all blocks. And we have now instituted a practice where annually we increase the blocks by an inflationary component so that they actually maintain an inflationary increase to support the buying power within those blocks. But certainly for large-scale projects, those are some of the financing options we would look at. And I think to take it a step further, some of the projects will have a growth-related component if they're adding square footage or if they're new facilities. We would also consider development charge funding. Those type of projects would have been included in the background study for the development charges bylaw, so that when those projects are ready to go, there are funds in DC reserves that can be applied to those projects relative to the growth-related component of them.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. We'll put you on for a second time, certainly. Over to you, Councillor Jackson.
Thanks, Chair Nan. Good afternoon. Thank you, Acting Director Savor and Consultant Langlois. Thank you very much for this long-awaited report, I'm sure, for most of our community. Chair Nan, I will try to ask questions at the high level that were presented. However, please, I hope you'll indulge me because specific project sites have been mentioned throughout the presentation. And so if I get a little parochial at digging a little deeper as to status, I hope you'll allow that as we embark upon trying to understand what to do with this report and the backlog. Through you, Chair Nan, to Acting Director Savor. This report does not speak to any consolidations across our community. In other words, I know that rec centers and arenas, community halls are hubs of our neighborhoods and are go-to places and are so much appreciated and used. So can I just get on the record, this report does not speak to any form of consolidation, but Councillor Jackson, here's the inventory of everything, and now what are we going to do with it? Through you, Chair Nan, please.
Through the chair, I think what our focus is to develop that prioritization framework in terms of understanding where the investments should be. In terms of any consolidation, we're not at that stage at that point in terms of really going down that path. There's opportunities to reuse, opportunities to explore what the additional uses could be. Obviously, we are basing our discussion and evaluation on the recreation master plan that is there, but that also provides an opportunity to be flexible in terms of in-year discussions. As we know, the state of infrastructure changes, and there are different circumstances that happen, and as Steve mentioned, opportunities for review of those specific opportunities in a year perspective. So this provides an opportunity to look at it from a landscape perspective, but there are always opportunities to have that conversation and look at what we need to do in year as from a strategic perspective.
Appreciate the explanation, Acting Director Savor. I don't know if you could put back up any slides, Consultant Langlois, if that's possible. I'd love to get slide 19 back up there. Elsie McIntosh, thanks for the quick assistance. Maintenance and renewal reinvestment levels, just so that it's in front of all of us. I'm just trying to understand this chart a little better, please, about the capital block funding amounts, recreation and parks current versus potential scenarios moving forward, status quo, a 2A, 2B, and a number 3. Just kind of piggybacking, if you will, off Councillor Alex Wilson's startup here of the conversation and block funding. Excellent, Elsie McIntosh, thank you. Slide 19, please. Consultant Langlois, perfect. So, you had it there? Right there. Wonderful. So, the current block funding that the city has is $8.2 million a year for, I'm going to focus just on recreation, $8.2 million a year. And you are suggesting, recommending that let's look at 2A.
4.5 million a year for recreation. If approved, that would add on top of the 8.2?
Through you, Madam Chair, yes, that is correct. So it would be 12.7 million in that scenario.
Your recommendations of 2A or 2B, that's quite a disparity, Consultant Langlois, between 2A 4.5 versus 24.9. You're saying, look, you think both are open for good discussion, but that's quite a disparity. You've kind of left it wide open on both fronts, or can you further elaborate and explain, please? Through you, Chair Nan.
Through you. Thank you, Councillor Jackson. I think that speaks to what Councillor Wilson had indicated. The backlog is a large figure right now, right? The average age of your community centers is 42 years. The rising costs are adding to that. So we recognize that, how do you eat an elephant? It's a bite at a time. To move you towards that $25 million of extra budget, while I know there would be a supreme benefit and your community would be impacted by that, we recognize that having a phased approach might assist you with making that more palatable. So that is really just a function of spreading that investment over 5 additional years. And that's why the numbers do turn out the way that they are. And, it does speak, though, somewhere in that range allows us to start reducing that backlog, start, chipping into it so it doesn't keep growing and make these facilities more accessible for our residents.
Thanks for the explanation. As well, Chair Nan, please, you tell me. I'd like to go back on a second time when my time is up. Sackville Hill, I'm going to get specific for a couple of items now. Acting Director Savor, Sackville Hill Senior Center. Councillor Pauls and I have been part, quickly, of an active volunteer group, the Board of Management, all volunteers at Sackville. We've been at this since before the pandemic. So 2019, let's call it, going on 6 years now. And it's recommended looking at part of the forecast for 28 to 31. Can I ask, just generally speaking, and again, I know that shovel-ready means a lot, and additional funding from sources beyond the municipality could tip the balance. Are we open-minded, Consultant Langlois and/or Acting Director Savor, if additional funding, tri-party relationships, feds, province, municipality, were to earmark the money needed for the Sackville Hill expansion, that could potentially accelerate that project? Through you, Chair Nan, please. And obviously other members of council, I'm sure, could apply to their specific ones dealing with their MPs and MPPs as well. Any thoughts, please, from either one of you?
Through the chair, I think I understand that you're looking at the specific project in terms of Sackville Hill. I'll probably just start off just a little bit high level in terms of our process in looking at this and developing this implementation strategy. It is really to present what the state and the prioritization is at this point. There's opportunities for readiness in which we take a look at things that might influence the ability for a project to proceed, whether it is increased financial support that comes about, whether it is a further deterioration of a specific facility that warrants better and quicker response. Those elements really impact how we deal with those opportunity readiness perspectives and looking at if those projects can increase in terms of timelines. So as you speak to the specific example, if there were opportunities for increased funding, that would be an opportunity to take a look at that for that specific facility and see if that presents some challenges or some opportunities to move that project a little bit further ahead. So in essence, we are trying to provide a strategic analysis and strategic framework for movement, but we're also understanding that there are additional factors that come about in year that allow us to advance some projects. And really that's for discussion at an in-year budget process in that sense.
Okay, Councillor Jackson, do you mind holding for a second time for the remainder of your questions?
Can I just, it's on that same topic of Sackville, or would you, I'm fine, I'll go with your leadership.
Okay,
Put me
thank
down
you.
a second time.
Only because it is a long speakers list. Okay, thank you. Councillor Crutch is next.
Thanks very much, and I'm in support of us doing everything we can to bring our recreation assets up to the level Hamiltonians expect. We talk a lot about how dollars show up for people, how people see what we do as a council. This has got to be one of the easiest ways for people to see we're investing in our communities. This is probably one of the more disturbing, shocking, hard to read reports I've ever had to read as a councillor, or as my entire time as a citizen in the city of Hamilton. The current way we're doing things is absolutely not going to work going forward. I want to just read you one bit of a part of this report that I think is just horrifying in terms of how we fund things. On page 2 of Appendix F, I know, it's right down in the weeds there. Page 2, Appendix F, at the bottom it says Ward 2 specific. And it says that in that category specifically, we spent $5.4 million. It doesn't really matter what the category is. I just want to make the point to you that 88% of that money was spent on a Parks North Yard at Bayfront Park that the public has absolutely no access to. This is how we're funding. This is how you've been forced to fund. This is how staff have been forced to fund these things, is by jamming these projects inside a recreation block funding asset. And so it looks like when you look at this, like, oh wow, you know, we got a lot of money invested in Ward 2 in that period of time in that relative category for the public. We did not. I'd ask every member of the public to dare themselves to go down to Eastwood Park and use the washroom facility there, then leave the washroom facility there and hold their head high and feel like that's a public asset we can be proud of. I'd say I could take you on a tour of Ward 2 where that'd be the case far too often. And I'm here, by the way, for supporting recreation assets in other parts of the city, especially in parts of the city where we chose previously to grow. And now we've got situations where, gosh, people don't have recreation assets, you know, and they need those recreation assets. What that does, though, just so you know, though, is it creates a ring around the downtown of new recreation assets and an absolute sinkhole in the lower city of deteriorating assets and a fairness methodology that's been going on here for far too long that says that that's okay. I'd love to see an outdoor pool in Ward 2. For those who don't know, one does not exist. We're spending money renewing outdoor pools other places and don't even have one here at all.
Me too.
So, I mean, there's other wards where this is the case, and I'm not trying to say this is, you know, only about Ward 2. What I'm saying to you, I'm giving you examples I have access to. I represent Ward 2, I don't represent other wards. I'm just giving you an example here. We cannot continue the status quo here. I'm so encouraged by this reporting. I'm so encouraged that we're going to be finally putting the dollars toward these things that we need. I need everyone to not, you know, do the thing we often do here, which is not look ahead and not city build and not think about the future. Because if we're going to be forced by the province to continue to grow and the assets we have today can't even keep up with demand, we're going to continue to see what we see, by the way, again in Ward 2, where we've had to close facilities down because they just physically broke. You know, finally getting a place where we can see women be able to thrive in sport or the roller derby, only to have the Eastwood Arena physically break to the point where it can't, you know, it can't be used in a sustainable way anymore. And because we have no ability to be proactive, and there is no proactive budgeting and planning as part of our recreation assets, there's no nimbleness there. It breaks, and then we have this little runway to maybe rehabilitate it for 5 minutes, and then it's toast. Meanwhile, right, that community goes without an asset. Those individuals don't have that asset. And now they're competing in other assets around the city. And we're putting strain now from Ward 2 and Ward 1 and Ward 3 and Ward 4 and Ward 7 and Ward 9, right? On those assets, which can't bear the strain. Like, this is just not sustainable and has never been sustainable. So we either care about making sure everybody in our community can play, can be healthy, can recreate, can feel a purpose of belonging, you know, especially in dense parts of our city where people don't have access to backyards. So I don't have questions. I've read this report. I've met with staff and talked about it. I just find it sobering, disturbing, and about time that we stop telling our residents that they don't deserve to live in a city where the basics matter.
Thank you, Councillor. Next up, we have Councillor Huang.
Thank you. To Mr. Langlois, I'm speaking about the presentation, and in the presentation, when we look at slide 17, the financial and sustainability review, how much, and this is very similar to Councillor Jackson's like sort of last question, which is like looking at tri-parties and like opportunities that way. How much thought was given to opportunities for, say, triple P type relationships, mostly because Ward 6 has had the value and the benefit of being pitched an unsolicited proposal at the Mohawk Sports Park. We also received a presentation yesterday on a cricket opportunity in Ward 5. So how do we build in that sort of like external interests that might help with revitalizing and helping with some of that financial sustainability?
Thank you, Councillor Huang, through you, Madam Chair. We recognize, just given the growing need, not just for reinvestment, but we have emerging needs. It's a growing city. What folks are looking to do in their parks and recreation centers is evolving. I think it's been noted that new tools and new approaches can only be need to be considered. The details of those are not considered herein, but what this report helps to do is to signal to the community, signal to others that may be aligned and help the city achieve those goals, what those priorities absolutely are. I know the city's been working towards and had a lot of effort towards an unsolicited partnership framework. These are important tools that give staff and give members of council the direction that they need to evaluate these. In many cases, yes, there could be others that bring a benefit to the work, but balancing risks and balancing benefits is very important to any partnership. And the partnerships that are unsolicited, there's a due diligence that's required from a municipal perspective just to be sure that those are in the best interests of your taxpayers. So we know there's more work to be done on that. That's been flagged in the report, but we recognize that by signaling to the community that these are our priorities, it helps to plant the flag around where those investments are needed, and others, if they can get on the train, I think that's certainly for council to consider.
Thank you. I think that when I'm reading this report, one of the things that feels very glaring is that we haven't actually put the call out to ask for the community to help with the participation and that sort of thing, because everything is so catering to what we've already been doing, which is block funding, which is looking at. So it was just one of those things that I just thought was really interesting reading this report, that we didn't even ask the question of, or help with that solicitation of additional monies that might be available. We don't give the public an opportunity to even consider what are other funding mechanisms that might be available. So I think that when it comes to this being an implementation strategy, I kind of wish that we had also opened the door for just even the thought process for other types of funding mechanisms to potentially come forward. As well, when it comes to the implementation strategy, how are we also being nimble to today's challenges? Ward 4, just speaking selfishly, doesn't really factor very highly in not only in the recreation master plan, but also in this implementation strategy. So how would we, on a go-forward basis, try and update? What is the cadence to update and to add more feedback, or what's the way for us to be a little more nimble in today's day and age? I hope that makes sense.
I'll start, if I could, through you, Madam Chair. Being nimble is doing this planning on a regular basis, but not letting this planning slow down your momentum. So we talk about the criteria and the variables that this report does consider. It looks at a variety of equity-focused and infrastructure-focused inputs. So as your asset management information and data evolves, that can be layered in. As your communities change and grow, we have population forecasts, but we know decisions of council, decisions of the market can alter that. We're on the cusp of having some new 2026 census data that can get layered into this to provide some additional flexibility that's, it continues to be responsive to those needs. We know like the recreation portfolio is the toughest one, because these are, if you're talking a recreation center, these are usually 5, more realistically 10 or 15-year builds. They cost in the multi-millions of dollars. It's harder to be nimble with those investments, and that's why having a queue, having, whether they're named projects in your budget or not, having some stable funding to allow you to achieve that stems the bleeding from being able to move forward on those larger projects. Whereas we've definitely seen through the pandemic and beyond, investing in the parks realm, that's a little bit quicker, a little bit easier, can still have a significant impact. That neighborhood park improvement program, for example, we think that's a quick win and a way to spread those impacts across all wards.
Last question through you, Chair, is I appreciate the one slide that talks about the reduce aspect of it. I know that Director Savor has been a part of some of my meeting requests when we talk about assets that seem really stranded in the ward. In particular, I'm thinking about a particular bocce building that's literally in the middle of a park that I'm just not really sure how utilized it is, or what is the optimized sort of utilization is there. So I appreciate that. I'd like to understand a little bit more about how we would go about changing or shifting the uses or the functional needs, and that in essence might help us with reducing the cost burden, or maybe there is an additional revenue generation that might happen because it's an underutilized or a single-use asset. So I wonder, how does that factor into this implementation strategy?
I'll start, but that may be a question for our colleagues in parks, if you're talking specific amenities. What this plan does say is, we know we need to be strategic and disciplined in our investment. So there are certain amenities we need more of. There's ones that, through attrition, we won't be replacing. And without getting into specifics on that, it involves, tracking of use, understanding what our challenges are in those sites, working with the communities themselves and the local councillors to find site-specific and localized solutions to that. So again, we've sort of planted the flag around a few facility types. That's not meant to scare off those uses that are being well used. But we need to be mindful that parks are public assets. The more dedicated spaces we put into them, the more we erode that public accessibility. And there are some that do need that closer look.
Okay, thank you. Those are all my questions.
Thank you, Councillor Huang. Next up, we have.
Sorry, Chair.
Oh, my apologies, Director. Go ahead.
If I can just add to that, in terms of our intent is to have annual checkbacks in terms of making sure that we are not developing a strategy that's sitting on the shelf, but is really reflective of the current realities that we do have. So it's a matter of obviously developing that baseline so that we do have a snapshot of where we're at right now. But it's also important to come back and have that new information and new things that help to guide the discussion along. So our intent is to really come back on a yearly basis, both from a parks and a recreation side, to understand what those realities are and how we can achieve those corporate strategies and holistic strategies that we want to achieve from this strategy.
Thank you. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of questions, if I may. So in Appendix G, and this is for the benefit of everybody, if my mouse will work, it's a detailed prioritization, scoring, recreation, master plan, implementation strategy. Can't get titles that are any longer than that. But when I went through the report, it had a number of facilities that were, in essence, they were being scored. And I don't understand how you get the weighting. You know, right off the bat, Victoria Park outdoor pool revitalization. You have the weight of 10 for the age of the building. Then you have FCI 12, accessibility 10. I can't see how you come to those conclusions. Is there a special ledger somewhere that gives me the numbers?
Yes, thank you, Councillor, through you, Madam Chair. Appendix B of the report has the detailed, each of those criteria has the weighting and the scoring for each of those. So it's essentially a bit, it's a bit of a matrix approach here. Each variable would have been assigned a weight depending on how reliable it was or how pertinent it was to the discussion. Scoring is relatively binary, 0, 1, or 2. And then using the data behind that, it's able to deliver a score. Those scores are added together to arrive at an overall score that would assist with prioritization.
So the bigger the score, the worse the condition of the facility?
For the infrastructure index, which would take into account things like age, condition, functionality of the building, yes. The higher the score, the more, the higher the priority should be for investing in a facility.
Got it. Thank you. Just it makes sense now, but when I was looking at it, I was very confused. Can I ask a finance question about all of this? Sorry. Everyone's smiling, Kirk, and looking at you. Oh, boy. I'll go easy. Are we permitted to charge development charges for community centers, for recreation centers, arenas, et cetera? Are we permitted to do that still?
Through the chair, yes. Recreation, indoor and outdoor facilities, there's two separate categories within the Development Charges Act that allow us to collect for both indoor recreation and outdoor recreation facilities. Our bylaw does include a charge. I don't recall specifically what proportion of the overall charge it is, but we do collect for development charges for growth-related components of our recreation and parks facilities.
So in the development charges that are collected in one specific area of the city, one community, the expectation is that development charges will be spent to provide services in that community?
Through the chair, development charges are collected citywide. So they aren't specific to a specific community. The charge is made up of hundreds, probably thousands of capital projects that are in the 10-year capital forecast based on master plans. But the charge itself is not specific to wards or areas of the city. The collection is a single citywide charge.
So when we are adding apartment buildings in my ward or a large subdivision of townhomes, and we get DCs on that for community benefits, they're not delegated or relegated to that community?
Through the chair, the collection is not specific to a community. The allocation of the spending is based on projects in the 10-year capital forecast and when they're in a position of, when they're ready to go and ready to be financed, and there's a growth-related component, then the DC reserves will be tapped into for those specific projects. So no, there's not a specific requirement that it be, if it was collected in a particular ward, that the cap is then spent on a capital project in that ward. It's a citywide charge. The DC legislation would allow us to create area-specific charges, but the city has not gone in that direction in the past. I think it has probably done, if I go back in history, there's probably some analysis that was done or exploration of potential for area-specific charges on various service areas, but it's never been implemented in the city.
And is that how we deal with DCs for other items other than recreation?
Through the chair, that's correct. I believe there's a couple of area-specific charges historically. I'm not going to be able to recall which ones for you today, but I can get that information for you. But in general, yes, every service area is collected citywide.
Thank you. And the last question is about financing. So when we're building a tertiary treatment plant, it's $350 or $400 million. We don't collect all that money in the same year when we're building that. It's financed. There's a financing program that pays for it. There's debt. Do we not do that for Parks and Rec? Do we not incur debt saying, okay, well, we have 4 rec centers that are going to be built in the next 5 years, and we finance them so that it's not expended all at once?
Through the chair, historically, we have done that for significant, like dollar value, significant projects. We cash flow them over a number of years. I don't believe we've done that traditionally for parks and recreation facilities. That is certainly something we can explore, given the magnitude of the needs that has been identified in this recreation master plan. It can be part of the financing plan and details that we bring back in the future to consider those kind of things. So we have done the multi-year plans, as you mentioned, for water, wastewater plants. And I think more recently, the Paramedic Central Reporting Station was also cash flowed over a number of years. For those kind of significant projects, we can certainly consider that kind of financing approach.
So I'm familiar with the financing that we've done on other projects. And when I'm looking at the order of magnitude of expenses for facilities in this study, I don't think we can hit the taxpayers with all of that money in one big hit in one big year. It would make more sense that you would pool all those, almost like a consortium. You've got 10 or 15 new centers, and they're going to be built over the next 10 years, and it's going to be financed over the next 10 years. Is that not something that could be done?
Through the chair, yes, that's my understanding, that part of what's contained in the report, consultant's report, as well as the staff report today, is to examine some of those opportunities and how we, close that backlog, whether it's, and I think the couple of scenarios, 2A and 2B, provide us how we might close that backlog, whether it's 5 years or 10-year scenario. So yes, those are exactly the kind of scenarios I think that we're considering through this report.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Councillor Maureen Wilson.
Thank you. I just want to say at the outset, I really appreciate all the work, and I know it's taken a long time and long nights to get here, so thank you for all of that. I agree with my colleague over here that recreational services is one of the very visible things that when people think about city government, they think about that. There doesn't seem to be a lot of questions about who does what on that front. So I have some questions about the consequence of the status quo. So are we keeping record? And maybe these are questions just as an aside for Steve number 2. I had asked for a separate session for council on asset management so we could get a good sense of like what is going on, what does it mean, how is it informing us? So if those questions are more appropriate there, happy to be directed. But do we have a sense of, we have a $176 million backlog. Is that the number? Could someone just, my computer's just phased out. Someone just, like what is our backlog on our current assets, please? Got it.
Global assets or just related to this report,
If
Councillor?
I could just say, I have here, my computer's just come up, I have here for recreation, it's 176.7 million.
Correct.
And for parks, it's 133.5 million.
Correct.
That's the present backlog.
Correct. It's the present backlog plus current year costs.
Plus current year costs.
But the vast majority of that is backlog, yes.
Okay, thank you. And I thought I heard you say the average age of our facilities, 42 years. Are we keeping record of or have we calibrated the cost of doing the same? I've heard reference made to closures, the number of closures kind of growing up, where the cost of deferring, thank you, the cost of deferring investment in that little hole in your roof, which maybe was costly. If we defer it, it's actually, we're going to need a whole new roof 5 years from now. Do we have a generated cost of more of the same? And do we have a cost of where these closures are occurring?
Through the chair, I think we do have Amber Dewar, who is available to speak to some of those costs or the principles behind that as it relates to asset management plan. A number of the basis of this information is derived from the asset management plan, and we've had discussions around a number of different committees and tables on that. So I'll shoot that over to Amber to maybe take this question.
Through the chair, so the backlog is comprised largely of what was identified through the building condition assessments. So we do have those projects identified. So that's largely what you're seeing in that backlog. But we're not putting forward like which facility should be closed in the asset management plan. We're just identifying this large amount of need.
Thank you. I guess I'm asking further to kind of Councillor Crutch's scenario. As we have grown, we have new, typically, on the periphery and older from the origins where we started. And I guess I'm trying to get a sense of, do we see a pattern in closure through the chair?
Through the chair, I can take that question. So I think that's one of the things that we've realized that we need to take a better stance in terms of gathering that information. Obviously, from a daily, a monthly, a yearly perspective, we are starting to compile that information. I don't have the specifics right now, but it's an exercise that we've understood that we need to do to better inform our state of our assets. And to your point, seeing what those patterns are, if we're seeing the same kind of issues that are happening in this specific facility, then that presents a lot more information for us to consider. So it's something that we are starting and continuing to do.
Okay. Thank you. Again, we have, I think, on our docket, a proposal in recognition of newer places in our community that are absent of recreational assets. Winona, I believe, Glanbrook, Waterdown, thank you very much. Do we have the capacity with our existing formula to meet those needs, which I believe, my opinion, are justifiable and needed, and do our state of good repair?
Through you, Madam Chair. I think a lot of it comes back to having that disciplined investment strategy. There's different tools, there's different funding tools, as Mr. Weaver has noted, different funding tools for different types of projects. So our growth-related projects, Waterdown, Winona, Binbrook, those are identified as really, I think, 3 of the 5 highest priorities. Much of that is growth-related, would be eligible for development charge funding. And having those as named projects, I believe they're already in your budget, allows for that work. You've been doing going out to the community, asking about input on design. So those remain very much high-priority projects to be funded largely through development charges. It's the other things. It's dealing with the 42, the 50-year-old facilities that don't have modern energy-efficient systems that we're seeing across the sector this summer. Indoor pools, the HVAC systems can't keep up. Staff, lifeguards are overheating. They're not able to offer the service. That is sort of like a hidden unplanned closure in the sense that, they just can't keep up. You're bringing your arenas on right now. Being able to pull humidity out of those within buildings that were built in the 60s and don't have the same insulative factors and the same systems to support them. They don't always get logged as closures, but there's a service impact there. Being able to put kids in change rooms that can really, that the parents can't get into because it's too small. So those are the areas where we know we need additional help. And the rising cost, part of the reason why you invest now, it's always been, when's the best time to plant a tree? What was yesterday? Because the cost to do the works that are required now would have been, pick a factor, half the amount 10 years ago. There's inflation and other factors to consider there, so we're not cutting it too finely. But that's part of why having a disciplined approach and being able to tackle this work allows you to focus on those priorities.
I have time for just a comment. It seems any time I raise the issue of consequence, someone takes exception to that. And they take it personally due to their service. And I have no interest in that personalization. My interest is trying to, I think, and my responsibility is trying to identify action, reaction, strategy, consequence, so that I can inform myself as a governor and be held accountable. If we have identified through successive budget decisions since the mid-2000s that we have a massive backlog and it's affecting, these are my words, some members of our community more than others, then we should not seek to shame people. We have, as Maya Angelou said, when you know better, you should do better. We should be informing ourselves of this, not seeking to shame or criticize, but to take, okay, we know this now, what are we going to do about it? What's reasonable within the context of we have some real affordability and budgeting challenges. But I will not accept this Pollyanna view that, things were much better back then. Maybe, but the consequences of that are being felt today. So again, my objective in this is to learn, to lead, and be informed, and to try and widen a circle, including myself in that circle of understanding. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. If I could to Vice Chair to take over, I have one quick question for framework, and then we'll go to our guests in the committee and then our second time speakers. So through you, Vice Chair, just kind of picking up where Councillor Wilson had left off, I just wanted to understand the framework a little bit. I want to make sure I understand what you're proposing as the framework. There we go. So when I look through Appendix, was it F, the financial summary of past capital investment, there is a clear indication of how much has been spent in each ward. A substantive component of that was the new Bernie Morelli Rec Center for Ward 3, which kind of, makes the Ward 3 allocation look very sizable. It served our community wonderfully. And then that juxtaposed against what the asset management and building condition assessment shows us and the conversation about closures. So right beside this incredible facility that everybody is very proud of across the city, but also the community is very deeply served by, is an aged asset that has historical and heritage features to it, which limit our ability to be nimble as a municipality to address the needs. But it has been consistently closed every winter and cannot function as a pool. And now, with climate change and really hot winter summers, we've got the HVAC system of it being too hot in the summertime. It remains not on the list for 10 years. And I just want to understand, I think I've misunderstood something in the decision-making framework. Because from an equity lens perspective and an asset lens perspective, a closure lens perspective, and everything else that I'm hearing here as being the decision-making matrix doesn't fit here. And I don't want to sound like I'm advocating only for a Ward 3 asset. I'm trying to look at it from a case study example, not as the ward councillor. So if you could shed some light to help me understand that, because I know I have some answers to respond to back in the ward. Thank you.
Thank you, through you, Vice Chair, and thank you for your question. So our starting point for this was the 2022 Recreation Master Plan. I think you're referring to Jimmy Thompson Pool. There was no recommendation around that specifically through that plan. And it does have a variety of unique aspects, characteristics to it, given its sort of heritage value and the legacy within that community. So it was not part of the evaluation. It was not one of the listed facilities. There were a few others that were not there. Valley Park Community Center was not because it's had recent investment. There's other ones that we knew, in some of those cases, and Bernie Morelli Rec Center wouldn't have been on there because it's a new facility. So that's why you're not seeing perhaps that facility within that roadmap. But through the endorsement of the decision-making framework here today, the goal would then be to allow for application of that, if council directs, to allow for other facilities to be assessed through that lens. You may have other lenses because of the unique aspect of that facility, different perspectives to pull into that one as well. But that would be why you're not seeing that one in particular.
Through you, Vice Chair, if I can really clearly make sure that I understood that correctly, Jimmy Thompson was not part of the initial assessment, but the framework, if adopted today and ratified by council, would enable council to identify other facilities that should be assessed based on this new criteria.
Correct. So there's a recommendation for community halls, for example, in this plan to use that framework to assess those. So just given the scope that we had to get this in front of council to test it with the facilities that we had within that inventory, we have those 20-some facilities that are dealt with through this plan.
Okay, thank you. I'll take back the chair. Next up, we have Councillor McMeekin, followed by Councillor Beattie. Then second time, we have Councillor Alex Wilson and Councillor Jackson. Thank you, Mayor.
Sorry, through the chair, if I can just add
Yes.
to your last question. I think you've indicated an excellent example of how we can take the framework and modify it and make sure that we are living that story from a year-to-year perspective. So the other point that I did want to interject and really highlight is the fact that we're also concerned about the emergency issues that happened at different facilities. So irregardless of the framework, there's going to be opportunities or times in which we have to take some quick measures to address some emergency issues that happen in facilities. So that's not irrespective of the framework, but also just a complementary piece that we have to just consider as well.
Thank you for that. Okay, Councillor McMeekin, over to you.
Yeah, thanks. And thanks for the invitation to come, and I appreciate it. And we've had, as I'm sure many others around the Horseshoe have had, some quiet conversations about pressing needs. Words like patterns and aging facilities sort of hit home to me. I took swimming lessons at the Jimmy Thompson Pools 70 years ago. 70. Yeah. So I suspect it's aged somewhat. The other thing that I was reading a book to my little guy the other night about Jack be nimble, Jack be quick. In this case, we're having challenges to be both nimble and quick. And some of that's very, very structural. The ward I'm privileged to represent, and I won't get very specific, I'm just keeping it as general as I can, is faced with dual challenges. Same in other parts of Flamborough, which I think Councillor Wilson has begun to articulate. Baseball, soccer, hockey, they're all big. In the rural community, the lights go down in Freelton, Strabane, Millgrove, and Carlisle. You're looking at $1 million plus to replace them. Well, baseball's very, very popular, and a lot of pressure there. So the conflict between sustaining facilities, and particularly in a community like Waterdown or Ward 15, it's one of the fastest growing communities, with the pressure on neighborhood parks and the new things like bungee courts and pickleball and of course a rec center. We don't have a rec center, you know. Again, I don't want to, I'm just trying to make the general comment about the need to balance between restoration and maintenance and meeting new challenges. And I don't envy you, either Steve and Don, and throw in a few others. I don't envy the challenge that you're up to. And if we can develop partnerships in the community to find some bucks, that's a good start. So, you know, we have that kind of issue. There's a lot of pressure in my community to do a Inch Park kind of developmentally a park that's completely accessible to those with developmental challenges and the like. So lights, arenas, all the repair stuff, new stuff. We're very grateful that the Waterdown Recreation, first and only recreation centers in the queue, and looking forward to that. Just a general comment, since a couple of people raised finances, I would have a much easier time justifying the pattern of tax increases in our community if I could point to neighborhood parks getting up a little quicker, and some of these things that are in desperate need of repair were handled. But I know you know that, and you know I know that, so we'll go from there, Chair. I appreciate the opportunity to catch the presentation, and I look forward to some creative entrepreneurial solutions that we can come up with. Thanks.
Thank you for joining, Councillor McMeekin. Next up, we have Councillor Beattie.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the opportunity to speak at today's meeting. I think this could be my first ECS. I think it might be. I should show up more often. It's really exciting around here. And by exciting, I mean, lots of important conversations taking place regarding scarce resources and much need. And I feel that this is almost turning into an episode of Hunger Games or something like that. And we're going to be climbing over each other any moment. I have a question, predictably, about rec centers. Spent a lot of times meeting with Director Savor, Manager Walton's tired of hearing from me. But I'm wondering if I could switch gears just before I get there. Because in Appendix D, hasn't been discussed at all, leash-free dog areas. And I only bring it up because it's part of Appendix D. I didn't actually plan on asking the question, but here I am, and I would like, if I could, with indulgence from the chair, and I don't see any objections there. On Appendix D, leash-free dog areas are shown as conditionally applicable for citywide parks, community parks, neighborhood parks. There's a very big interest in my community, as I'm sure there are around all communities. Probably the third biggest request we get in Ward 10. The nearest leash-free facility is in Upper Stony Creek in Ward 9. It's about a 20-minute drive. It's certainly not walkable. It's not accessible by transit at all. And I know that we cannot consider existing facilities, park facilities for that particular amenity based on the rather restrictive policies that we have in terms of where those facilities are best placed. So I have in my community, as part of the Stony Creek Urban Boundary Expansion, otherwise known as Scooby, 5 new neighborhood parks that are proposed in the ward. And I've had ongoing conversations as we proceed to plan out those parks in terms of suitability for leash-free facilities. I've basically been told, nah, we don't really do that in the neighborhood parks, but I do see the little indication there that it could be conditionally applicable. which is kind of counterintuitive to what I've been led to believe. I also have a problem because the only major community park that's planned, what we refer to lovingly as Mega Park, which would be an athletic park in the Fruitland-Winona area as part of Scooby. Athletic parks and dog leash-free facilities are not generally compatible, so that one's been ruled out. And then we've been working towards trying to establish perhaps the new Cherry Beach Lakeside Park that is part of the strategy. That might be a facility. There's complications with that. What's a guy got to do to get a leash-free park? What are some options? And I'm just asking this in this forum because I have all of the players before me. How do we get to that conditional threshold in terms of having that type of facility and amenity available within the ward? And it could be instructive for other members around here too that may have similar circumstances. Through the chair.
Through the chair.
Yep, Director Graham.
Hi. Through the chair, Cynthia Graham, Director of Environmental Services. So I sense the part of the challenge that we have with the newly planned communities is that we don't have a specific plan necessarily for what each park will be. And we have been able to find dog park locations within not typical through the criteria parks. A good example is Central Park just over here, where we were able to fit a facility in. It doesn't necessarily meet the specific criteria, but based on community input and based on use and design, we were able to fit it in. When we're looking at theoretical dots on a map, which really a lot of the parks in the Fruitland-Winona area are, I think the challenge that we have is we want to make sure we're prioritizing what neighborhood parks are intended to be, which are places for walkable families to have a spot for playground and walking trails and trees and shade and outdoor amenities and things like that. And necessarily a leash-free park or a dog park would limit those other amenities as well. I do take your point, though, that there are gaps and we do need to do a better job of identifying locations for amenities that don't traditionally and typically are accommodated within the park provisions that we have. And I can take that back to look and see how we can do a better job of that.
Thank you, Director. I would happily continue that conversation with you offline, and apologies if I've sprung this on you. We really need to revisit this, and it happens to be embedded now in this document. If I have time for another couple of questions. Thank you, Chair. Appendix E shows the corporate facilities and energy management recreation portfolio capital project expenses over a 9-year period between 2013 and 24. And it is glaring, $0 spent of the $110 million in the ward that I represent. I think that everybody can see the big donut hole there. In the total $219,168,000 spent between the parks portfolio and facilities combined, the ward again comes up with 0.03% of total expenditures in the ward that is among the fastest growing wards in the community. Appendix C shows some of the potential investments forthcoming under the project, which is known as the Winona Rec Center, in the 2028-2031 timeframe. We've discussed the ranking system, and we've already had some questions on what determines that. I'm trying to figure out, it's not an equity question, maybe it's more of an equality question, but we do have a community with zero investment over a decade. How does that play into ranking, if at all? Or how would a ward councillor maybe try to advocate better for investment in the community?
Thank you, Councillor. Through you, Madam Chair. Just to answer the question of how past investment is factored in, it was not one of the last seven. It was not one of those 17 variables. because we look at infrastructure that's already in place. And in some cases, in growing communities, the infrastructure is not there. It's lagging. Growth is, sometimes the growth comes first, then the infrastructure comes later. We'd love that to be more aligned. In terms of advocating, the scoring that we did use, and this flows from the 2022 RMP, growth and distribution and access to services is really a key determining factor. Both plans really speak to access, to convenience, to serving as many residents as possible, and trying to address gaps. Now, it can become difficult with difficult land uses, and off-leash dog parks are a good example of that. But the Waterdown facility, the Winona facility rose to the top because of the growth that's coming and the gaps that do exist in that community.
Thank you for that. And I was corrected, it's 2.7, not 0.3. I missed a decimal. We have also been talking about higher order government contributing to some of these projects. We're in the middle of right now there's an open window for the Community Sport and Recreation Infrastructure Fund, CSCRIF. I understand that we're in the second tranche of this funding window, which is intended primarily for new builds. Does that ranking change, or does that, how do I phrase this? Given the current ranking, how do we prioritize projects that may be eligible, more eligible, or less eligible for very specific funding windows such as CSCRIF? How does the scale slide depending on what windows of funding might be open?
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. Every grant opportunity should definitely be exhausted and looked at. Many of them have their own specific eligibilities. Some may be more focused on energy efficient upgrades, for example. Sport tourism, we know is also something that's has in the past been a driver. Our experience in working with other communities is that these plans do get you grant ready because they do provide that priority listing. And so you've checked off usually a big box in those grant applications of, do you have community support? Is this consistent with your budget documents? Is this a priority of council? Whether it's your first or your fifth priority, I think that's, I think it does indicate if you're in that range, you're a top priority for the community. So I only see that as this being value add to help meet those requirements. And Steve?
If I can also add through the chair, I think this is a great point that you bring about, Councillor Beattie, in terms of our readiness for those opportunities. And the grant opportunity that you talk about is very, very competitive. And I think most of the chances that we have as municipalities are really factored upon shovel-ready readiness. So it's not, I think these type of plans and these implementation strategies are great in terms of providing the background and the support and the rationale for that. The other part of it is having the financial commitment from the municipality to move ahead so that we are in a position to act upon and to score successfully in those projects. So being really shovel ready is one of the key terms that we hear constantly, and we need to present ourselves in more of that kind of fashion moving forward.
Okay. Final question, if I may, very quickly, Chair, and thank you for the latitude. Building off comments about alternative funding sources, we talked about higher order government. One that sometimes comes up from time to time is things like naming rights. But typically, we apply naming rights after the facility has been constructed. Not necessarily, I don't know of an example where it's done before or during. Is there an opportunity? And I'm pulling at all threads here because obviously there's a need in my community. If there was, I don't know, I win the lottery tomorrow and I want to call it the Jeff Beattie Rec Center, and I want to contribute, and I'll contribute to something in Ward 4 too. Sure, why not? But my point is, do we have opportunities, or is there a vehicle for some kind of private sector involvement or investment? And it could be through naming rights, it could be through something else, I don't know. But what is in this new implementation strategy that might allow for that. And if it's in there and I've missed it, I apologize. I'm just wondering if you can give an alliteration on that.
Through the chair, no, that's a great question and great opportunity to highlight that as an alternative funding solution to that. So you will find that in page 5 of the report in terms of additional supplementary funding strategy. So you're correct in the sense that we do typically and historically do achieve naming rights after the fact. But it's also a matter of let's start thinking about different ways in which we can utilize community support, whether it's through partnerships and funding arrangements, whether it's through sponsorships and naming rights before the fact. We do have the chance to leverage those community supports and move projects in a way that allows us to have better scope of engagement with the community in that sense.
Thank you for that. I did miss it. 5 of 11 is what you're referring to in the report here?
That's correct.
Okay, it just didn't jump out at me. Thank you, Chair, for the opportunities.
Councillor Beatty. Next up, we have second-time speakers. Councillor Alex Wilson, followed by Councillor Jackson.
Thank you. I'm referring to the funding options. I don't need them up, but just so you know where I'm talking about, the various options there. We're talking about clearing the backlog without doing new investments in option 2. What is a new investment and what is a backlog in given? So I'll give the example of the Dundas pool. That's a recognized need. It's in that. Is that a new investment or is that a backlog investment? So I think that's what I'm not clear on, is what actually falls under what category. Can't say option 2 is my favorite option, but understanding those, like what is a backlog investment versus a new investment that's getting deferred?
Through the chair, I can start and maybe throw that to Amber to speak from an asset management perspective. But again, the information that derived this, these solutions came from the asset management program. So the identified backlog that we have as of the current date. So that doesn't speak to those new investments. It speaks to the current assets that we do have at this current time. Perhaps, Amber, if you want to confirm or deny that.
Through the chair, I don't have a list of what projects were in the backlog at this time, so I couldn't speak to that. If it was identified in the building condition assessment as requiring work, it would be identified there. And in the asset management plan, if there was budget allocated towards it, it would also be in there and it wouldn't be as part of the gap. So just unfamiliar with that specific project at this time.
So it's project specific. Not all revitalization projects are going to be backlog. Not all revitalization projects are going to be new. It depends on where it was in our last plan is where it is in this plan. Is that a fair understanding?
Just to clarify, the asset management and backlog really just deals with like for like, right? The boiler's ready to go, it needs to be replaced. The roof is at its life cycle, it needs to be replaced. So when we talk backlog, it's not accessibility upgrades, it's not expansion, it's not, making a better change room, better lighting. It's
don't want to cut you through the chair. I don't want to cut, but I think you're making my point, which is, so what does option 2 actually mean? That's not operationally achievable then, because we're never just going to be investing in backlog replacement. We're always going to be doing a bit of A and a bit of B. So I don't understand what option 2 is based on that answer then.
Option 2, through you, Madam Chair, is accelerated funding to allow you to be more coordinated. It doesn't mean you necessarily need to follow the like for like items that are identified in your asset management plan, but accelerated funding allows you to say we're going to go into a community center, pick a community center, and instead of just doing a project here or there, we're going to be more thoughtful around it. We're going to do a more wholesale improvement to it, and allows you to start improving that. But what it means is, potentially other items could grow in backlog as well. So I think this is why we've also outlined this scenario 3, which is more of the sustainable. It's the proactive. We're stuck right now in the reactive. We'd like you to move towards being responsive at minimum, but a longer term view of being able to tackle some of those strategic challenges that you're having with those facilities.
And through you, Chair, that makes sense as levels of investment. Like if we want to talk about these as levels of investment, I understand that answer. But when it says specifically in the recommendation, that means we're deferring non-backlog projects. I guess because so many of the projects in such a historic place are actually renewals, I don't have an understanding of if an option, like it doesn't say explicitly, these are the projects you would be deferring, these are not. So I only have revitalizations essentially in Ward 13. So that's my context that I'm thinking of. And I guess my question is, if we go with option 2, when we then go to this other chart where it says recreation facility investment roadmap, that's assuming we throw all the money at it possible. But I guess I'm trying to understand how far back do certain things go in that investment roadmap based on the funding options we pick? Because we've said, and we show a visual that says we'll be investing in this rec center in 2031, this one in 2045. That all seems contingent on option 3 funding. And so I'm just trying to understand the interplay between that chart and the level of investment.
Well, and certain things are also funded differently. I think there's a bit of an, there's the understanding there. So anything that's an upgrade would tend not to come from, or may not always come from your backlog. You have the ability to charge development charges for that. So I think the blending, to me, I think the blending of the funding sources is part of what makes this a little bit murkier. We've tried to isolate the revitalization, the block funding as being the primary tool through which a lot of these revitalizations are delivered. So that's where our lens is, and we do recognize that additional financial planning, if you want to get more specific around, and I think that's ultimately where this would need to go. If you have a named facility, what exactly would a revitalization project look like in that facility? What's required, and then that can get layered into the work. So we're kind of operating at a percentage level and trying to make this more specific to the facilities, but that's only going to come with time.
I think I'm just going to reiterate my comment that I don't understand why we're talking about block funding for project funding. Like because we're talking about only funding replacements, but the projects in front of us aren't replacements. They're different. So I'm not seeing the link between the funding recommendation and what we're actually going to be doing in our budget process when we talk about new versus old in option 2. Like I'm just not understanding that distinction of pure backlog funding, because it seems like operationally we'd never just do pure backlog funding. We'd always do option 3 just at a lower funding level. Like they're all just option 3, just at different funding levels. So I can follow up offline. I'm just not following. If I could ask another question.
Yeah, please do.
So that chart that showed the phasing, those were the recreation projects. I look at the levels of investment, that's where those recreation dollars go to. What projects are the park dollars going to? And which facilities are part of which funding envelope? So for example, is a pool being funded from that recreation conversation that we're talking about, or is it being funded from from the park? Does it depend on if it's indoor, outdoor? The reason I'm asking is because the park section doesn't have specific projects, but the rec section does. And so I'm just trying to understand where those money goes. And then my follow-up question would be to parks is, what are your top 3 priority projects? How do those levels of investment that we're talking about between option 2A, 2B, and 3, like what actually happens there? I know we're building towards a financing strategy, but these are some of the core details of that financing strategy that are so opaque to me right now. Would we get specific projects in that financing strategy? Is that the level of detail that's coming back? So what gets included as rec, what gets included in parks, and then maybe a specific follow-up to the parks team about where do those dollars go and how does a different level of investment change where they go?
Through you, Madam Chair. I can start that and maybe pass it up to Cynthia Graham to assist with that. So this study, you're correct, we don't have that flow chart of park improvements. You have hundreds of parks. We know hundreds of them need investment in various ways. So we've tackled that differently. We've said these are the types of amenities we know the community is looking for improvements to or more of. So that's been provided. And the study does speak to some very specific, some specific sport park items, whether it be Mohawk or Heritage Green. We know those are priorities, so we've flagged those. And then there are 2 specific funding programs that are required. One being something around sport field improvement. We always say the best investment is on the lands that you control. So you have great parks. They're in a lot of great locations, maximizing the benefit to the community through that, through lighting of fields, I think was mentioned earlier. That's a good example. So trying to enhance priority around the sport amenities as well as the neighborhood park initiatives. Whether, again, I'll use the playgrounds as an example. So while there are not named projects, that would be work that can be delivered through the priorities identified in this plan, and perhaps.
Yeah, and if I could just narrow in, because that helped, I guess my question now is remaining is, when we get to the financing strategy, will there be named projects within the Parks Department? Like that's what I'm trying to understand.
Through the chair, Cynthia Graham, Director of Environmental Services. I think the challenge that we have is that we have so many park projects, and so it's challenging to put it into a comprehensive and comprehensible diagram similar to the rec center projects. We prioritize our projects through capital budgeting, through discussions with councillors, through need and life cycle assets. And so really our capital budget is the document that we would look to that would show the prioritization and the choices that staff are making with recommendations on what is the need in any given year for funding. Similar to what one of the Steves said was, looking at what are the core responsibilities or functions of any given park, looking at playground amenities and those sorts of things. The other criteria that I would apply in looking at park projects going forward is there a health and safety issue? Is there a gap in need? Is there, a change in, use or bookings of any particular amenity? And working with our rec colleagues, that's sort of what we would do to make that analysis. Certainly I can take the request for a more comprehensive look at our projects and apply this type of prioritization to it and create a document. I can do that. It was just more of a looking at the budget and the volume of parks and the complexity of range of different types of projects that we would implement that made it a bit more challenging to do that exercise.
Just a comment on that, and then I know I'm well over time, and Councillor Jackson's been so patient.
I prefer you to complete it rather
thank
than
you.
coming on again.
I will need to come on again for a comment, but on this specific thread, I think just to why is it valuable to get project-specific details is because if you're sitting in a community that is a 25-year-old park and then another 25-year-old park and then a third 25-year-old park, and now we're talking about $300 million of additional investment over 10 years, people need to understand that their park is getting fixed in 2030 as a part of this plan. Their park is getting replaced in 2031. And so without those levels of details, we're making a commitment that you'll benefit and you'll see the benefit and it's going to happen and it's going to be citywide. And different members of us are going to have different communication barriers, different trust levels, talking to different communities around the city. And people just aren't going to believe it, frankly, unless we can say, here's the plan, here's the year. And so I understand there are some things that are lower budget that it doesn't make sense to go through that level of detail. But I think specifically when we're talking about clearing the backlog, if there's a park that's 25 years old and it's due for replacement, and there's a park that needs a bit of a fix-up that's 15 years old, I sure hope that we can tell folks we're going to fix the 25-year-old parks first when there's that funding available. Right now they're on delay because there's not funding available. And so that's just, for me, I think that list, even if it's a bridge list or it's focused, helps talk about why this level of investment is necessary and what residents are actually investing in. So just a comment on that one. Thank you.
Thank you. Over to you, Councillor Jackson.
Thanks, Chair Nan. Two things I'm delighted to hear with another round of Q&As is a couple of colleagues realize how incredibly important rec centers and playgrounds and parks are as hubs in their community. Absolutely delighted. And also delighted to hear several colleagues, a number of colleagues today, both committee members and non-committee members, talk about how to accelerate the funding with other sources of funding that possibly could provide a triple P and get their projects moving forward given the capital restrictions we have and the overall tax increases that we're hopefully trying to not to overwhelm our taxpayers with. So where I left off about 2 hours ago, Chair Nan, through you to either Consultant Langlois or Acting Director Savor, Sackville Hill Senior Centre, as I did with the quad pad 22 years ago, unsolicited, private-public partnership, no cost to taxpayers after 20 years in existence. They make money, we make money, provided 4 pads of quality primetime ice that wasn't in existence before. I'm asking you again today through you, Chair Nan. And we did this about 10, 12 years ago before most of you were on council. Councillor Clark will remember this for sure. When the tri-party funding agreement came from Feds Province and municipality, and it was earmarked for recreational facilities shovel-ready, Stony Creek Community Centre near Battlefield Park benefited, as did the Westmount Recreation Centre. Back to you, Acting Director Savor, where I left off about Sackville Hill. Design studies have been done. Task force has completed its work. Your staff have been intimately involved. If there's that type of tri-party arrangement and funding coming forward, and the federal provincial governments earmark it site-specific, are we open-minded to say we need to bring that forward to council, and we're not just going to say, well, you know, Tom, Sackville's got to wait now. There's 22 other projects ahead of it. I'd like to have an answer, please. Through you, Chair Nan.
Through the chair, my simplest response is yes, that we are open to that. When we talk about the opportunity readiness and the ability to leverage some of those additional partnerships, funding, those are the things that we are looking for in terms of that opportunity readiness, and that's what we would look at in year to respond back or to recommend to committee and council at that point.
Thank you, Acting Director Savor. Also, I need to ask for the record, because you've got it on in the body of your report. Speaking of unsolicited bids, at least for public consumption, I'm grateful to this committee that unanimously forwarded on to your division for review, professional assessment, the 2 unsolicited bids for the Dome, which they both bids wanted to earmark for Mohawk Sports Park, but for broader citywide use, if it ever came to be. Can you give us a status update of that, please? Through you, Chair Nan.
Through the chair to the councillor, the importance of having this discussion today and undergoing the work that we've done with the implementation strategy, we felt was important, an important step in terms of the overall dynamic of looking at unsolicited bids and proposals. Without having a rationale, without having a strategy and formal documentation, we hope that we will get approval of the work that we've done today. It allows us as staff to be able to respond to proposals as they come with factual and appropriate information that's based on foundational work that we have done. In terms of the proposals that are in play, they are still in staff review, but we were critically focused on this implementation strategy. There is also an identified understanding that as a corporation we need to strengthen our policies and procedures around unsolicited proposals, and that work is actually being tasked, and it's on work plans across the corporation. So a couple of things in terms of our work on those processes and policies is undergoing, and the proposals are still in play in terms of a report back that is due from an outstanding business list perspective.
Thanks, Acting Director Savor. Prudent steps, absolutely. Today is an absolute must and a necessary, hopeful approval by committee and ratification at council. But I'm glad to hear for public consumption, especially for the 2 bidders, that their proposals are being still reviewed and hopefully will be in play. And just to piggyback and to conclude on that, Chair Nan, again, at a time of taxpayer limited resources, if we've got opportunities both from private sector, not-for-profit, other levels of government, for goodness sakes, if it's in your ward, folks, great, wonderful, I'll support it, as I did with Westmount and Stony Creek. The YMCA up at Turner Park would never have been available or to be built for the growing South Mountain community if it wasn't for the Y coming in up and a private-public partnership back then with the not-for-profit, with the YMCA. So my goodness, we've got to be open-minded to these potential bids. And lastly, I was remiss in not thanking Manager Don Walton, who educates me and has kept me informed on the master plan so that I have the ammunition necessary both at committee and more importantly to my community to apprise them of what's happening. Thank you, Chair Nan. Thank you, Acting Director and Consultant.
Thank you, Councillor. So we have two more speakers, Councillor Maureen Wilson, followed by Councillor Alex Wilson. I need to apologize to our two presenters. It's been 2 hours in this conversation, and you've been standing on your feet. So it's so late for me to realize this, and I apologize in advance. So no, not trying to make my colleagues feel like they have to speak quickly, but we're close to the end, I think. Yes.
For sure. Thank you, Chair. Thank you. I'll add to I'm contributing to that. I did want to better understand, if I could understand, there has been some conversation from I think the previous speaker about getting shovel ready and hoping to line up either private or senior orders of government. But in so doing, it costs money to get ready.
Yep.
Designs are costly. All of the securing always external consultants to do so, the feasibility, et cetera. How are we accounting for those upfront costs without any assurance that we're going to be successful in our efforts to line up senior orders of government? How is that reflected or calculated in our scenario, if at all?
Through the chair, I'll start, and maybe someone from the bench can support. I think it's a well-crafted and well-thought-out question in terms of providing opportunities for us to capitalize on those opportunities for senior levels of government funding. I think from recent discussions, conferences, even at AMO that we've heard about, we are in a competitive framework, and we need to start looking at our internal processes on how we can be a little bit more nimble. I think of procurement as one aspect in terms of how we can look at strengthening the processes that we go through in terms of looking at that procurement process and how we set ourselves up in terms of working with general contractors and the phasing of construction projects to allow us to be in a stage that's ready for shovel ready. The other aspect is from a finance perspective in terms of, what are the different ways in which we can look at our financing options and allocating money in year and in future years to be able to get to that level. So those are two pieces that, as a starting point, we need to start looking at different processes and trying to improve that from a city perspective so that we are in positions that are in better competitive stances with other municipalities. I can just throw to GM Mader for additional comments.
Thanks very much. Through the chair to the councillor. This is a challenge that we're finding across the board when it comes to not only with the recreation, we're hearing it from housing, we're hearing it from childcare, is about that ability to be ready and respond and to be more nimble, that if dollars and funding becomes available, this provincial government particularly wants to be able to, have it within their terms, see it from start to finish and have it accomplished. So it is one of those areas that across the corporation we are looking at how we can be responsive as we can to not miss the opportunities. Thanks.
Thank you. I think I'll take the question somewhere else because I'm still not clear how we calculate and calibrate for that what could be a sunk investment. It could be a stranded investment of design and feasibility if we're not successful. So in securing that top up. And I think there's value in that risk, but I don't understand how it's reflected in the scenarios and the work going forward. Because if we can't, it's already been established, we cannot afford with this backlog to miss any granting funding opportunities. But we've got to be prepared and supportive of allocating upfront money that could be sunk because we're going to do the feasibility and the design, and then we don't have the money. So what are we going to do corporately? Does that mean that that changes the priority of that project? I don't know.
Through the chair, that is something that we can take away and see if we can come up with I think it's going to take an all of the corporation's response to it, because it does include planning, it does include finance, and as well as each of the departments that are impacted by it. So thanks.
Yeah, I don't know, Chair, if Councillor Jackson was looking to answer something.
He appears to.
I sense,
Yeah,
I sense something.
I sense something too. Councillor Jackson?
Thank you, Chair Nan. Through you to Councillor Maureen Wilson, living example. 6 years ago, the Board of Management at Sackville, all through volunteer fundraising, offered up $200,000. My office offered up a companion $200,000. The Ward 7 office offered up $200,000 to give them $600,000. No taxpayer levy, no impact on other ward budgets, so that the need was there after 30 years, the growing population of the seniors on the mountain utilizing that center. $600,000 from those three sources to begin the design work to get us to this point, if that helps giving you a living example. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I am being a bit cheeky because almost every Ward 1 project has been Ward 1 funded to get to that point. And no disrespect, Councillor, but as a mother who had children in school fundraising projects and suggested that perhaps in where my children went to school, we didn't need actually new gym mats, but I knew Hess Street School did, but my neighborhood had the capacity to fundraise. Right. That is not in keeping, respectfully, with the issue of need and opportunity and capacity. So that, I think, also has to inform the discussion. So I did have an additional question, but it's not important enough to keep you on your feet. I would say in closing, I have always been, through my tenure as a public servant and a now elected man, to be very supportive of public-private partnerships, as you can see in my support for LRT and the operating and maintenance agreement, and on and on and on. Thank you.
Thank you. And for final comments, Councillor
Yeah,
Alex
I'm
Wilson.
sorry, because I do believe I'm asking one of the more relevant questions, and apologies to be doing this as a third-time speaker, but I don't understand what's coming forward as part of the 2026 budget process. And I think that's a pretty relevant question, so apologies that it's coming 2 hours in. There's 3 recommendations that speak to how we're going to pay for this and what happens next. 2 of them are we get annual report backs on staff's recommendations. I'll just flag, we've talked about this as if it's a comprehensive funding strategy, and that I think that's what we're working towards. But the recommendations in front of me read as we're going to get an annual report with priorities and recommendations. So I think that's not a multi-year strategy. Maybe as year 1 we get those recommendations, but I'd certainly hope we're working towards a multi-year strategy. So I'd like to hear staff's answers as to when we will have a multi-year strategy. When does that come in as part of this annualized process? But one of the recommendations specifically says we're going to refer these to the 2026 budget process. We're now in the 2026 budget process. What are staff's expectations on that, hearing that alternative 1 is not what staff are recommending? We also don't have a costed plan for something in the range of option 2 or 3. Is it the intention of staff to bring something back for consideration throughout the budget process for 2026 specifically that looks at options? Does that happen via the mayor's directive? Because we're now in the process. I'm just trying to understand, what are we actually going to do this coming year? And then when are we going to switch from this year's funding and yearly recommendations to a multi-year strategy?
Through the chair, great question. So I guess I can start off by trying to build that kind of roadmap per se. Before we have the chance to recommend those funding strategies, we needed to develop that prioritization. So we needed to understand what are we actually trying to fund. And obviously we've started, we haven't applied it to all of our facilities, but we've applied it to those ones that are of emerging need and are of imminent concern as we see it from the capital plan. From that, we've developed that funding scenarios. And again, it's somewhat difficult to forecast what we need from a multi-year perspective, knowing that we haven't fully completed all of the aspects of our facility analysis. But it's a matter of taking what we know and the information that we know as of now, seeing if the work that we've done from a prioritization perspective fits the understanding of what committee and council are looking for, and starting that conversation for 2026. Obviously, from a mandate perspective, it is the mayor's budget, and we intended to have this presentation months earlier. A number of factors that did impact that, but we are at this juncture right now, and so it's a matter of providing that opportunity for committee and council members to have that discussion along with our corporate colleagues, finance, and all the departments to try to understand how that fits for 2026 and to come back with some discussion and some recommendations at that point too.
Thank you. Through you, Chair Nan, I'm just maybe wondering if GM Mader or Director Hrstek could just, and I've asked this question every single year, in this exact phrasing, I think, to staff offline. We know that the block funding is not sufficient. Will staff be requesting an increase beyond inflation to the block funding as part of this year's budget? Every year previously, it's been, we're going to look at it, we're working on this multi-year plan, we're going to bring that forward. Is this year the year that we're going to ask for more money than an inflationary increase to the block funding, given that we know it's not possible? Because if we discuss it as councillors, then a councillor has to move that motion. I'm asking specifically, is it staff's intention as part of the budget process to bring forward a recommendation of increased block funding beyond inflation?
Through the chair, excellent question. From my understanding, the block funding has already been assessed and sent to both recreation and our client groups. So it has been set for 2026. What our process is that we'll bring forward the projects that match the 8.2 million for recreation, and then we will add additional projects that potentially are below the block. And if councillors want to raise them above the block, they would have to be added into an additional financing plan. That's the process that we followed in the last couple of years. I anticipate that's the process that we'll be following again.
And thank you. Just to put that operationally, if I don't want option one to happen, do I have to move a motion as part of the budget process? Like, is alternative one what is currently baked into the 2026 budget process? Is that just hearing what I heard, saying it differently?
Through the chair, not yet, because it has not been approved by council. Once it is approved by a council, we can bring it back as an option through the budget process.
Sorry, I just didn't follow it. I guess I'm specifically at like the funding request that's currently in the budget that we saw today. Is that best described as alternative one? And if so, is it going to change? If it's not going to change, if it's going to stay that, could it be described as base funding? Or I don't understand, based on what we've talked about today, what we're doing in this budget year.
Through the chair. So the budget outlook that you saw this morning would contain scenario one with a 2.3% increase in blocks, because I think they used the 2025 block amount. So that's what's in the outlook currently. I think looking at recommendation H, what that would mean in terms of being referred to the 2026 budget process is we would review options to fund scenarios 2 and 3 and what that might look like, how we might fund it, what various funding sources, including block, including potential debt, which spreads out the cost, but there's still a cost, and other funding sources. So as part of the 2026 budget process, or the materials that you would get in December, we would work with our colleagues in recreation to assess what those increases in block funding or alternative ways to fund those two scenarios were. But currently, the outlook report reflects scenario one.
And sorry, those options from staff are activated via approving recommendation H in this report. Further direction is not required to actually ask staff to provide options, because this just says we bring Appendix E to the budget process. That's how I read H. What I'm hearing from the answer that was previously stated is that H is essentially asking for options to be brought to the recommendation process, not just we bring this appendix forward 3 months and we look at the appendix again. Like, there'll be more details brought. That's what I'm trying to understand, is the level of detail. Will specific proposals be brought forward, or will just this appendix be included and attached to the budget?
Through the chair, I can't speak to the specific details we'll have in it, but it would be more than just the appendix. We would need to explain how we might fund those increases in the block funding, and that's where we would work with the recreation staff in developing financing plans. So it's more than the appendix. The level of detail, can't tell you today, but there will be more.
I was just trying to understand if direction was required to get options, or if it was baked into the existing recommendations. So what I've heard from you is that direction is not required, it's baked in. You're not necessarily sure what that project's going to look like right now. I'm respective of that, but that something is in the works and will occur.
That's my interpretation, yes.
Wonderful, thank you. No more questions from me, thank you.
Thank you. And that exhausts our speakers list after, I don't know how many hours you all have been on your feet, but thank you so much for fielding all the questions with your thorough responses. I'm going to say that the mover is Councillor Alex Wilson, seconder would be Councillor Crutch. That is for both receipt of the presentation and for tabling of the report. So at this point, we'll need one vote to both receive and approve the recommendations in the report. That's electronic with a thumbs up from Councillor Jackson. And that carries. Thank you so much, everyone, for all the background work. I know it took a long time. There was some delays getting here, but thank you so much for everything. Very detailed, thank you. We still have a couple more agenda items. Everybody else can go that doesn't need to be here for them. Item 8.3 is expanding housing and support services for women, non-binary, and trans community subcommittee minutes from our August 14th meeting, moved by Councillor Wilson, seconded by Councillor Wilson. Were you there as well, right? Yeah, we were there together. And electronic vote to receive the minutes? With the thumbs up from Councillor Jackson. And Councillor Crutch. And with the tallying of that vote, carries 6-0. We've exhausted our agenda. We are adjourned. Thank you.